Wow, look at this motley crew tonight. Round of applause. Unfortunately, Crosby got his microphone working really good. So listen to him. James Crosby at Crosby Designs out in lovely Ontario, California, where I assume the weather is beautiful, as always. Nice. Of course, Mr. Brian McTaggart, straight out of, Bowling Green, Kentucky, the home of Holly and all kinds of other good horsepower events, etc. Of course, I'm Chad coming to you live from Richardson, Texas, and Susie Bauer doing media relations for Arrington, also coming from the Tennessee, Nashville-ish area. You're, half hour, 40 minutes south of Nashville, something like that?
About an hour, yeah.
And Mike Copeland, who should be coming to us from, the Michigan area, where diversified, et cetera. But no, as usual, You were traveling. So where the hell are you?
I'm just outside of St. Louis. I'm here for the NMCA, NMRA races this weekend. Yep. So we have the Arrington rig here and all of our partner companies. So we're set up for the weekend.
It's cool. That racetrack, McTaggart and I have been there a ton of times. Now is it Gateway again? I don't remember. It's changed names a bunch of different
Worldwide Technology, last I looked.
That's right. Worldwide Technology. Yes. Cool racetrack. We've been there a bunch of times, done a bunch of live broadcasts there. Hopefully the weather's good for you guys this weekend, because it's not good there every time we seem to go.
No, it's like 100 here today.
Oh, which means it's also 80% humidity, which means it's just miserable.
It's the Midwest. It's what we're used to.
That's true.
Yeah, but at least it's spring. The mosquitoes shouldn't be out in force yet.
Yeah, no, they said the heat index was like 105 today. So
yeah, well, that's actually not that much off of Texas the last few days. So,
Same for you, McTaggart. Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, no AC, vinyl seats. It's lovely up here.
Oh yeah. Hey, you know what? That's a great segment though, because McTaggart drives a 70s vehicle every day. Crosby and I own only old stuff. We don't own anything new. Susie, obviously you're a hot rodder for a long time. You guys have multiple hot rods as well. And Mike, you've driven everything known to man. But today's topic is going to be alternative fuels, and specifically hydrogen. You guys have, you guys have just hired all the rocket scientists and you've gotten everything going at Arrington, and are doing stuff with hydrogen that just blows my mind. But before we get into that, I want to talk a little bit about alternative fuels and sort of the history in the United States. So, Crosby and I have talked about this. There's a lot of people that are super negative about ethanol and fuel nowadays. And so you can buy ethanol-free fuels and people gripe about it and this modern fuel and blah, blah, blah. So I knew that gasohol, as it was originally called, was around for a jillion years, right? It's been around since the 70s. Well, or so I thought. Turns out I was wrong. Gasohol was actually invented in the 1940s and was run in Nebraska since the 40s because they had so much corn. So they made a lot of fuel there in order to cut gasoline and make more money, because they weren't having to spend it. It was only 90%. So literally 10% ethanol has been a thing since then. Since the 70s when we had the oil embargo. So we've had ethanol and fuel at various levels. But of course, in modern times, we've gotten into E85. Now, Mike, I know you were with General Motors when the E85 movement was starting with the OEs. I'm sure you were testing it long before anybody had it in a passenger car. Now my experience as a guy who has E85, I have two cars that run on E85, but they're, they make 1,000 horsepower, right? I have it because it's a, cheap race fuel. I say cheap with the air quotes because the fuel system's got to be way bigger. So that ends up costing a lot more money. And the quality of E85 is just, especially here in Texas, where nothing actually has to be what the label says, is horrible. So, it's been a challenge. I know. Can you get E85 anywhere in Michigan, Mike?
Yeah, it's in a number of stations. It's the same here as it is in Texas. It's anywhere from E75 typically through about E92.
Yeah.
Just depending on who mixed it that day. So,
yeah, and see, here in Texas, they recently changed the stickers, and I say recently, in the last year, and now on the pumps, it says something like E63 to E85, and it's, I mean, I don't know anybody that gets E at a pump that's better than 70 anymore. Now, I've never tested it, but I'm told that if the base fuel is good, 70 is all you need in order to actually use it and make big power with it. But I haven't tested
it. It depends on what you're tuned for. So we build some cars that run on it. Some people like it. I'm not personally a huge fan, but if I'm going to do methanol, let's just do methanol and quit messing with the 15% of whatever else it is. So
right,
that's just the difference, right? The advantages are it's got a theoretical octane of about 105.
Yep.
85 is, and the real advantage is that it cools the intake charge. So,
right.
I used to race back when I was a kid. I raced mini bikes on straight alcohol, and then we started tipping the nitro can in it. But on a 90-degree day, the intake manifold would frost.
Right.
We used to make our own little billet aluminum intakes, and they would actually frost over from the alcohol passing through them.
That's awesome. Well, and it's funny, but the you talk about methanol versus ethanol. Methanol's been used in racing for ever. I don't even know when they started using methanol, but I'm 49 years old, and it's way more than I've been alive, right? And typically methanol was such a cheap race fuel in comparison to racing gasolines. But right now the price of everything is crazy, so it's up considerably from where it used to be. But why couldn't we use methanol in street cars? Why would that be a bad call other than making people tear up, which wouldn't be bad to me?
The biggest issue with it is if you use E85 as an example, it has about 30% less energy than gasoline has. So it requires about 30% more just to run. So
right.
From a fuel mixture perspective, methanol has about 50% less energy than gasoline. So it requires 50% more. So
right.
Everything that supports the fuel system has to be that much bigger. The other real disadvantage, a little bit of this with E85, it will actually wash lubricant off of parts. So
right.
It washes all the lubricant off the valve stems, off of the cylinder walls, off of everything else. Plus, it's highly corrosive. So if let's say you run a methanol car and you run the track one weekend and you don't drain the fuel system and put some gasoline through it, you leave it for a week, you go back, you knock the bowls off the carburetor or open up a fuel line somewhere, you got stainless line or whatever, it's going to be corroded to death. So it just builds that white scale that just goes in and plugs everything. That's in Florida, as an example, they've got huge issues with that.
Well, and that's because the water that the alcohol actually attracts, right?
Well, it mixes with it, but anytime you add the ethanol, most boats that were built up until the last 10 years all used aluminum fuel tanks. So you would pour that E85 into those boats, or even when you get E10, and you pour that into a boat, and the water mixes with it. The water lays right on the bottom of the tanks, and then it corrodes, and then all of that gets picked up and sucked into the fuel pumps and through all of the either carburetors or injectors. So
right.
It's not as simple as just leaving it. So the pure volume required and some of those other things are why methanol would not be a great street fuel.
Well, and I asked that because the number of people who don't understand what alternative fuels there are out there, or how they came to be, or how we use them, is amazing. The number of people that don't who don't understand where and how E85 is produced, or ethanol, I should say, is produced, blows me away, because the sort of propaganda that the big oil companies have thrown out there, because they obviously don't want it, is just not what's real, you know? And so we can make ethanol from so many waste products in the United States. It's unbelievable. I mean, from cheese production, every bit of whey that comes off of cheese production can be used to make ethanol. All of the mash that comes off of making every ounce of beer or whiskey in the United States can be used for making ethanol. In fact, some of the best stuff, some of the best E85 that you can buy from some of the race fuel places does come from beer, and you know it because you can smell it. Like when you actually open it, you can smell the mash, right? And so it's one of those things where there's a lot of different ways. When I was in college, ethanol production was a new thing, but I did a really large paper on the fact that we're doing it wrong, with regards to corn in particular, because of the way that corn has to be processed for animals to eat it. Is the same way that we need to get the juice out of it to make ethanol. And so literally the feed companies would be getting a free already started processing, product if we did it right. But again, it's all of these hoops that you got to jump through. And the number one thing ultimately is that no matter what kind of fuel we're talking about, whether it's E85 or methanol or gasoline or diesel or any of that, they all create emissions. And the emissions are actually our biggest problem. We think of the problem as how do we get enough of it and how do we make it cheap? But when we're talking about the government and, the EPA and the manufacturers, then we need to be looking at, at what those emissions are. And as, there are a couple of new things that I've been told about, some of these new electro fuels. A company called Prometheus is making these systems that are pulling CO2 and hydrogen out of the air and actually making hydrocarbons from the pollution in the air in order to then make gasoline again. And it's rocket science and it's a bunch of crazy and it takes all kinds of technology and a ton of electricity, which they have to support by literally putting a power plant at the facility to, run on wind and solar and all these things. And so it is no way, no how a, make it work today kind of thing. And it has a net, of zero emissions. But when we're talking about hydrogen, there really are no emissions other than water vapor if we're running an engine on it. Is that right?
Yeah, a very, very, very minuscule amount of N2O.
Okay.
We can create hydrocarbons if we get the mixture extremely rich. We can create a little tiny amount of it, but
overall, in comparison to gasoline, how much would we be talking about as far as the amount of NOx?
It's almost immeasurable.
Okay. Gotcha.
And that the only way you get it at all is to get the fuel mixture off. So we rate hydrogen fuel ratios. The description is lambda.
Yeah.
And is how we measure that. And lambda, you have to be below lambda 1 to get any kind of hydrocarbon.
Wow.
And we're running much higher than that.
So when people talk about hydrogen, and for those of you that are in the chat right now, I know that some of you guys have made some comments and have some questions, we're going to get to those for sure. Thank you, everybody, for tuning in. I think everybody has seen, well, I shouldn't say everybody, but people that live in big cities have seen buses that say, I run on hydrogen, right, on the side of them. I know they're all over Southern California. Colorado's got them, I know. They're all over. Those buses there's no internal combustion engine that's running on the hydrogen in those, right? Those are fuel cells. Is that right?
Correct. Yeah, that's and then like Nissan makes a fuel cell vehicle. Toyota makes a fuel cell vehicle. Those run. A fuel cell is basically an electric generating device. So you inject hydrogen into a membrane, you burn it as it physically goes through the membrane, and it creates electricity. And then you take that electricity out of that membrane, load it into battery packs, use it to drive wheel motors.
Okay.
So that's how a fuel cell vehicle works. You basically take the hydrogen, burn it, use it to generate electricity, and then you extract the energy and use it to power a vehicle.
So in that kind of scenario, efficient, good for the environment, all those things, but there's no hot rod noises. There's none of what we all love about a car associated with that. I mean, I suppose if you did it and made enough electricity, you could have I'm going to use this as the example, but a Tesla that was powered by hydrogen. I suppose you could, make one of those, because they're fun. They go fast, right? But again, doesn't make any of the noises, doesn't have any of those other things that go along with it. Are there any other downsides to a fuel cell?
Well, they require battery packs. So you still have to have lithium. You still have to mine lithium. You still have to create battery packs. They still have a maintenance schedule. They last for X amount of time. And then we have to figure out what to do with them. So right. I know there's a lot of work being done today. A lot of people are focused at trying to recycle them. And some of the latest I've heard is that some of the best that are out there claim they can, repurpose about 80% of the lithium out of a battery pack. But okay, you get millions of those things around. Now, interestingly enough, the fuel cell is probably, at least by today's standards and knowledge, it is probably the most likely replacement for diesel engines. Okay. So diesels do not operate. You can't just take a diesel engine and put it on hydrogen. Okay. So hydrogen does not work well with compression ignition. Oh, okay, gotcha. So they would require some other changes to support that and to make it function. And not, a smart person might say, "Wow, how does he know that?" Yeah. Well, I'm sure you've tried it, but yeah. Not yet, but we know the background and we understand what it takes. So. Well, and you guys are working with, you have two big partners on your hydrogen efforts, and one of those is Bosch. Obviously, anybody in the car world knows that Bosch is a technology company. I mean, that's what they do. They make all kinds of systems for all kinds of automotive applications and all kinds of automotive processes, and then Redline Oil. And Redline, because of their distribution network with regards to providing, a place to buy hydrogen, how do those partnerships work, and how are those helping you get where you are trying to go? Well, and Redline's owned by Phillips 66. Okay? Right. So one of the largest oil companies in the world, and they understand and they see the future, and they know that there has to be, we have to find a way to clean up emissions and reduce all those things, right? So Phillips 66 is in the process. Hydrogen is ahead of in Europe, is ahead of the United States. So there's more fuel cell vehicles. There's more things being looked at. That's where some of the parts that I have that I use were being developed under Bosch in Europe, and so they're ahead of it there. So Phillips is in the process of putting about 150 hydrogen filling stations across Europe right now. So they're very, very interested in it. I've spent a lot of time with them, as we've gone down this path working on it, and how do you get to where you need to be? How do you get hydrogen across the country? If Phillips 66 alone adopted hydrogen, they have approximately 2,700 filling stations across the United States. Okay. So basically, in the time it takes to build them, they could build and have 2,700 public hydrogen filling stations. And they're looking at that, right? There's a company called Plug Power, and Phillips is working with them as well. And they're very much focused on hydrogen and in some of the different avenues. There's a lot more hydrogen than people think and that people know about. I mean, you touched on buses, right? And some of things like that. There's some cars, obviously, Toyota and Nissan make that run on it. Did you know that virtually every Amazon facility, all of the high-lows have fuel cell in them? They all run on hydrogen. Really? They manufacture their own hydrogen on site, and which is a technology that's now been carried over into fuel filling stations and many of the new ones. You don't no longer have to make it in a facility and then truck it and put it into the storage tanks. You can manufacture it by drawing the moisture out of the air and manufacture hydrogen. So
McTaggart was asking about that before we went live. He said, well, you go, McTaggart. Tell him you had the question.
I mean, it's been a running joke ever since I learned about the vehicle, which is the immediate thing a lot of people are going to go to is the Hindenburg disaster. And rightfully so. I mean, ever since the crash actually happened, hydrogen and the Hindenburg have gone hand in hand, because you saw an airship go from floating in the air in Lakehurst to on the ground, the skin nuked off, framework melting in approximately 40 seconds, give or take. And a lot of people have, I mean, there's numerous theories on what happened. Basically, it boils down to two main ones, which is the skin was flammable, which isn't quite right, or that the hydrogen just burned everything away on its own, which isn't exactly right either. There's other factors in play. But all that withstanding, we could deep dive into the Hindenburg forever. The basic thing is that hydrogen alone isn't the reason why an airship that large, why that catastrophe happened. It just isn't. There's more to it than that.
Yeah, a lot more. So, and I can briefly explain to you what that was and how it happened, because it has been researched and it has been identified, right? What happened and why it happened. So, and just a little bit of background on hydrogen. So hydrogen is the lightest element known to man. Okay. It's a molecular structure, is very small. It will leak through things. As an example, fuel lines. If you use a traditional stainless fuel line, like what you would use in your hot rod, like what Crosby builds with all the time, right? If
like a braided stainless line?
Yeah. It will permeate right through the line. Hydrogen will just escape with a solid 16th inch wall stainless line. Hydrogen will just leak right through it. Okay.
Wow.
So if you do stainless hard line with hydrogen, we have to use 1/4 inch wall. Okay. To keep the hydrogen from going through it. So hydrogen is the lightest element known to man. If you release hydrogen, it's going straight up as fast as it can travel. Okay.
Right.
So to do that and to contain it, when they did the Hindenburg, and they used it because it was light. Okay. So there's a numerical system that's been developed to apply a number to the weight of a gas. Hydrogen is number 2. Okay. There is no number 1.
Because they wanted to leave it open in case they found something, right?
In case they found something, right?
Yeah.
So
science,
hydrogen is
people,
number
science.
2.
Yeah.
Yep. The air around us right now is a number 34.
Wow.
So that defines how light hydrogen is in relationship.
Right.
When the Hindenburg was built, they built a big cloth balloon because they wanted to keep it light. They used hydrogen because it's so light it'll float when trapped, right?
Yeah.
The problem is it went right through the cloth balloon. So there was no way for the cloth to contain it.
Yeah.
To contain it, they covered it with an aluminum type material that they melted and basically coated all of the cloth with it. And then it still leaked through. So there were 7 other chemicals that they used to ultimately seal it, to reduce the hydrogen leakage.
What could possibly go wrong here?
Right? Well, the problem with that was you had this big, basically aluminum balloon that was covered with flammable chemicals, and then they ran it into a power line. So when they ran into the power line, the aluminum conducted electricity, burned a hole through it. The hydrogen that was trapped inside the balloon, hydrogen burns at approximately 3 times the rate of gasoline. So the hydrogen escaped and went straight up. So you got the big woof and you had the fire that made all the pictures and everything else. But the hydrogen went straight up and escaped. It burned, and then it actually goes into the atmosphere and will mix with the air and put itself out.
Right.
So the hydrogen immediately dispersed. When that happened, the cloth and the other chemicals continued to burn, and then the Hindenburg crashed. So most people tend to think that everyone died and and the hydrogen burned them all to death and everything else. In reality, it was only, and not only, but there was in the low 30s of people that passed as a result of the crash. Most of them died from the crash itself or the burning cloth, and the burning chemicals that were on that cloth and on that aluminum came down over and burned them.
Right.
The hydrogen went straight up. Unless somebody was sitting on top of that balloon, they weren't getting burned by hydrogen at all.
Right.
No, there's actually a good picture of this, and I need to explain what you would see in this picture. Chad, I'm going to send this in the chat.
Yep. No, just share it.
And use your comparison, Mike.
Remember, it doesn't work that way for us.
Oh, so yeah, it should. But
here's how I describe the difference.
Yeah.
Imagine if the Hindenburg had been filled with gasoline. Gasoline is heavier than the air.
Yeah.
If you had punctured that, it would have immediately went into flames, just like the hydrogen did.
Yeah.
Except it would have all gone down on top of the passengers.
Yeah.
It would have burned for a minimum of 3 times as long.
Because of the fact that it's so slow in
slow burning.
I believe the number was like 40 minutes.
It would have covered everything underneath it.
Wow.
And it would have just continued to burn.
Yeah.
So, that's how I describe it to people, right? Is it flammable? Absolutely. Is it the devil's brew that some people want to believe it is? Absolutely, it's not. Right.
Right.
The tank that we use in our truck is spun aluminum wrapped in carbon fiber. It's DOT certified.
Right.
Our entire package is been DOT certified. All of our fuel lines that we use are military spec.
Okay, so what I want to show you here.
Here's a picture of the Hindenburg for those that don't know.
I want to point out 2 things, which is the back end of the ship, the part that's going towards ground, that's where the fire originated, somewhere in the back cells. And then you see this chimney effect that's coming out of the nose of the ship. And one thing I want to point out, there is no color photography of the Hindenburg in process of destruction. None. All of that was shot black and white. And the reason why that's important is that hydrogen does not burn visible. Everything else that's burning with it is visible, but hydrogen itself is not. Hydrogen burns in the ultraviolet. So black and white film can capture that. So if you see a dramatic picture of this where you see fire and flame, that's colorized.
Yeah, it wouldn't have looked like that.
You wouldn't have seen
person.
it.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
You would only see the collapse, and you would probably see some of the smoke at this point because there are other things burning, but that's the thing.
Well, and so that brings me to a couple other points. So unfortunately, Manja 12, right when I was getting to his points, he seems to have some knowledge on hydrogen. And was making a bunch of comments here. He's left us, or he said he was leaving us before I actually got to talk about some of his points. But one of the things that he brought up was the storage, being problematic. And I don't agree with that, and I'll tell you why. And I'm not the norm, but Crosby will know where I'm going. Like I own several vehicles that have compressed tanks of air in them. And I realize they're at much lower levels, but I also have owned vehicles that had, 3,000 PSI tanks of compressed air on them instead of an air compressor and small air tanks. I've been a welder forever. I've owned trucks with welding rigs on them that you hauled around with gases that are also very flammable. All of those tanks are all rated to be carried, and they're rated to be hit by a train, and not explode. So the truth of the matter is, those containers go through a considerably more certification, testing, etc., than your average gas tank does in a Toyota Camry or a Chevy Cavalier or a whatever,
Or a Pinto.
Right, or a Pinto, exactly, or a Crown Vic, which was the Pinto of the 2000s. So yeah, so I do want to talk about a couple of things that Manja brought up. So he says hydrogen being burned to run internal combustion is possible, but it's hotter and makes more NOx emissions as it goes over the 2,500 degree mark, and storage is a bit of a special consideration. We talked about those things. He talks about alcohol being possible. I don't disagree with that. So he also talks about the heat that a fuel cell, a hydrogen fuel cell does, and that, that can be, if you were to use that, that energy, you could do more things with it as well. But one of the other things that that somebody brought up was, hold on, Ron Ward. Ron brought up the fact that, I'm trying to find it here because I want to make sure I get this correct, but that because when you said about making hydrogen on your own, facility or whatever, it made me think of this. He said, Sprint used moisture from AC units at cell towers to create hydrogen to fuel their service vehicles in Kansas City for several years. So if a hydrogen plant, right, whatever you call it, if it takes the moisture out of the air in order to then process the water and make hydrogen, every air conditioning system on the planet does that. I mean, that's what an air conditioning system does. So does that mean that in theory, somebody could devise a system that took the condensation from the air conditioning systems in our homes, and then we could make our own hydrogen at home if you were so inclined and had the machine? I mean, is that even a possibility, or is it too dangerous?
No, it's absolutely a possibility. And I think in the future, one of the real opportunities for fuel cells are to power homes.
Yeah.
So you could put a fuel cell in at your home. You would no longer need to be on the electrical grid. You could actually over manufacture electricity and sell back to the power grid.
Well, and you could make your electricity from the hydrogen fuel cell. Well, yeah. You could make hydrogen. You could use some of that to make the hydrogen fuel cell make electricity for your house. And some of it could go in my 69 Camaro and I could drive it. All of which would, if you got the circle going the right way, would make little or no emissions compared to anything we do now to make all of this. I mean, am I missing something here?
Nope, you're right on the money. That's a future opportunity, right?
Yeah.
And one of the struggles with it is, like in the case of our truck, we run our hydrogen in the storage tank at 350 bar, which is 5,074 PSI.
Okay.
Okay. So you have to pressurize it. You have to have a compressor basically to pressurize it to build that pressure.
Right.
That's one of the bigger struggles to doing that. Hydrogen is actually manufactured and created by a number of different sources that people don't even know or don't think about. I actually had an opportunity to talk to a gentleman who owns a company that manufactures a chemical that's used in hospital laundries that kills every germ known, right? So they use this chemical in the laundry room.
Yeah.
A byproduct of the chemical is hydrogen. So in any of the laundry rooms where they do this, they have to vent the hydrogen out of the room. So they have to put basically a ventilation system to suck the hydrogen out because it all goes to the ceiling.
Yeah.
It's light. It's the lightest element. So they actually pump it out and just blow it out into the atmosphere to get rid of it.
Wow.
So, there's hydrogen is created in a number of different sources, a number of different chemicals created. You find it when you tap, wells, methane wells and things like that. And so the struggle with that is just getting it to pressure. Okay.
Right.
So, like I say, many of the fuel stations. So when we started down this path last year, there were like 50 hydrogen public filling stations in California.
Okay.
Shell committed to build 40 more in the state of California. Legislation passed through the California House and Senate last year that they're adding 100 more hydrogen public fuel stations across California. So in the next 18 to 24 months, there'll be approximately 200 in California.
Okay, well, just for record to those of you that are watching, that will mean that there will be more places to fill up with hydrogen than there are that carry E85 in the state.
Yeah.
Because there are currently 137 stations in the state of California supposedly selling E85. So
yeah.
Yeah.
So hydrogen today, traditional hydrogen manufacturing takes electricity and is somewhat dirty, right? And so in an effort to do that, we had the traditional hydrogen. The next step of that was blue hydrogen, and blue hydrogen uses more renewable energy, and it uses more, wind and solar and things like that to create the electricity, to create hydrogen from either the atmosphere or from water. Today there's green hydrogen, and green hydrogen is manufactured with zero carbon footprint. All the electricity that's used to create it is done either through solar or through wind. There are some other processing changes in the way the hydrogen's made. So that's a big plus. If you take green hydrogen as an example, that's created with zero carbon footprint. Okay. We can take that green hydrogen, put it into the truck. We extract the energy from that. We burn the hydrogen and we extract the energy from it, and we use it with zero carbon footprint. So from start to finish, we create transportation with no carbon footprint.
Now, I just put up the truck on the screen because I want people to see it that aren't familiar. So not technically, this is your lovely wife Deb's truck, and she is quick to point that out because this was not the original plan for this thing.
No, it was not.
So when you said, "Hey, honey, I think we're going to use your truck," this is a 1948 Chevy pickup. It is in every way a hot rod. It has so James Crosby builds cars for a living, builds trucks for a living. If Crosby was building this, it would have all of the same parts in it that this truck has. TCI, total cost involved, is literally a block down the street from Crosby. That's the chassis that's under this truck. This truck has an LS3. It has an American Powertrain TKX. The LS3 is built. It isn't just stock. It is built. It's got all kinds of good hot roddy fun parts in it. It's got vintage air. It's got classic instruments. All of the things that are in it are all of the things that, again, Crosby and a variety of other hot rod builders around the country would use, right? It's all of the brands, all of the products we know and love, Forge Line wheels, Bear brakes, all those things. It is every measure an absolute hot rod. And there are only 3 components in the entire truck that anybody would know are not the same. And one of those would only be because they read it. But so the camshaft has some very specific specifications, and we'll go over those a little bit later. The fuel tank, okay, is a bit different. It's pretty cool because it's carbon spun, like you said. And then on top of that, it's the 16 fuel injectors, which are a different kind of injector than you would normally have, gasoline. So according to what you're saying, I assume that the fuel lines and stuff are also a bit different in order to hold the hydrogen in. But other than that, this is a hot rod, which is why you're so focused on making sure that this is technology that can go into hot rods, because anybody that's got a fuel injected hot rod can in theory have this work in their particular application. This one's got a Magnuson supercharger on it. It's what, a Maggie 2650, isn't it?
Yes.
Yeah. Yep. It makes, at SEMA, it made 500 horsepower. I know it makes more than that now. So I mean, what kind of power are you guys making with it?
Yeah, right now we're injector limited. So that analytically, we targeted 500 horsepower. Okay.
Yep.
So we're injector limited because the injectors are all experimental. All of the hydrogen components, most of them are experimental. And the injectors were actually something that Bosch had developed for like a 1.3 liter 3-cylinder, right? Which is why we have 16 of them.
Yeah.
And so there's 8 in the traditional location. And then we machined an adapter that goes between the intercooler lid on the supercharger and the supercharger. And we have 8 more in there. And just by coincidence, they might be at a Hemi spacing and Hemi angles just because, I own a Hemi company. And I used a set of our fuel rails to feed them.
Right. That's awesome.
Anyway, so we're running 16 injectors and we're injector limited. Right now, we're running at 9 pounds of boost and just barely over about 9.2. And at 6,100 RPM, we're making over 400 on the tire.
Pretty
and
good.
I have a dyno that we nicknamed Karen. So I have a Mustang MD800.
I was just going to say it has to be a Mustang because if whatever power numbers you claim on a Mustang, it will exceed on every other dyno on their planet. Yeah. So,
Interestingly, it actually makes a little more torque than it does power.
That's cool. So I have a question then, because people have a bunch of questions that I think we should answer right now. We've been on a bunch of tech, but this is some fun stuff. So Mike Zelenko says, does it make any type of sound?
Sounds just like a gasoline truck.
Right. It doesn't sound any different because it's running. You and I know it's running on hydrogen. The engine doesn't really know that, right? It doesn't care. The ECU handles all the part that matters. So it's running. It's just a LS3 with a blower on it. It sounds awesome.
Yeah, I've posted a number of videos of it running on the chassis dyno and some of the stuff we've been doing with it. And it sounds just like a gasoline engine. I mean, it revs up like a gasoline engine. It's a very surreal feeling when you stand behind it because it makes no smell at all.
Yeah.
And once the exhaust comes to temperature, the only byproduct of burning hydrogen is a little bit of water. And once the exhaust comes to temperature, the water comes out as steam, so there's no water. Yeah. So you don't see the steam. There's nothing on the ground. It'll actually, if you go through a cold startup and run it through the cycle, it'll actually evaporate the water, the little bit that when it's cold, it puts on the ground. It'll evaporate that off of the ground. Our tailpipes are kind of turned down a little bit in the back. So it's very, if I didn't tell you it was hydrogen, you wouldn't know.
Right. And the only difference is you can't possibly kill yourself by having it run in the garage with you. So
I haven't tried it, but they claim you can drink the water out of the tailpipes.
Well, come on, you chicken! I'm in. Yeah, I'm all in. I'll do it. You know me. So
I'm not saying I wouldn't. I just haven't.
Okay, good. Well, okay. So Dan Parker, by the way, the world's fastest blind man to 211 plus miles an hour.
We love Dan, Chad.
We do. Dan is the man.
Do it. So.
I know. Dan is such good people. Love him to death. So Dan has a question. It says, what about 10 or 15 years ago, people talking about running motors on water? He goes, I assume it is burning the hydrogen. Is it a myth? And he asks that. Another guy, Bruce Allen, brought it up and said, look up Myers, Stanley Meyer, who had a car that ran on water. According to some of the other folks, that's totally dispelled as being fraudulent, et cetera. But there's a whole bunch of conspiracy theory stuff that goes around that as well. So when somebody ever said they were running an engine on water, what was the deal?
Well, I mean, technically, my truck runs on processed water.
There you go.
We take water and we turn it into hydrogen. We don't. I mean, I buy the hydrogen, but that's what happens. They take water and turn it into hydrogen.
Yeah.
And then we burn that hydrogen. So it has there's no carbon monoxide, there's no carbon dioxide, none of that comes out of the tailpipes. The only way to really get hydrocarbons is you can get the fuel mixtures really rich, and that's hydrogen rich, not gasoline rich.
Right.
And you can do that, or you could introduce oil back into the intake tract. So if you do have blow by or you have something like that, then that could be back into the intake tract and could cause you to create some hydrocarbon and some carbon monoxide. But aside from that, and our engine's exceptionally, it's brand new, it's exceptionally clean.
Yeah.
And you touched on it briefly earlier, and I specifically, when you go down a path like this, you do all your analytical work, you do all of your planning, you have some assumptions that you operate under. I think it's important for people to understand, this isn't some backyard garage project, right? I mean, yeah, I'm that backyard garage guy. I've lived my life there, right? But I do have a little background, and the people that I surround myself with, and I bring in to help in this project in particular, are some of the smartest people you'd ever imagine. I have the resources of the entire Bosch organization. Okay. So we can go in there and we can run all the analytics and we can do all of those other things. And we make what you would consider engineering assumptions, and we test those and we run those under theory. Okay. So there have been people in the past that have run hydrogen. In particular, when I launched this truck, a lot of those, obviously I'm in the industry. I've been in it a long time. I've been on the OE side for 26 plus years. I've been in all those positions. So I have a lot of friends, and, a lot of them called to share things with me, right? Things that have been done in the past, things that have been tried with hydrogen. And many of them had issues with a lot of different challenges. Okay. We haven't solved everything when it comes to hydrogen yet, but I can tell you that I have not had a single person that's had experience with it that has told me the issues they faced and the things they had that we haven't solved those issues. We're treating this just like an OE level development program, right?
Which you are intimately familiar with. I mean, your last position at Chevrolet was with GM Performance Division. You were responsible for a lot of development work, a lot of concept car, creation. You're not I laugh because Optima Batteries, stole the Mike Copeland motto. Like it says they engineered the quit out of it. Well, they stole that from you because they engineered the quit out of you when you were like 12. So
yeah. Well, I've been lucky to work with some of the smartest people in the world, right? The guy that's my chief engineer on my hydrogen program was a partner of mine at GM, one of the two smartest engineers I've ever met in my life.
Yeah.
And he's retired, and he's the guy that did hydrogen fuel cell builds at GM. He's the guy that made all those decisions. He was the one that knew this military spec line that we use even existed. I mean, no, I didn't know anybody else that knew that. I didn't know it. The companies that sell the products didn't even know it existed.
Right.
We had to go in and show them what we wanted and have them order it. Right.
I have a question, Mike.
Yeah.
As far as lubrication, being
Yep.
that diesel and gasoline are a lubricant contrary to popular belief,
Mm-hmm.
how does hydrogen affect the lubrication?
In our testing so far, so the positive, the negative to it is that it doesn't provide any lubrication. The positive is it doesn't wash any away either. So, using methanol or ethanol, they wash lubricant away.
Right.
And we have none of that. The other thing that's a huge advantage, there's no carbon. Absolutely.
So the pistons are clean as a whistle.
Everything. I mean, we go in with a borescope and look and check things, and it looks exactly like it did when we bolted it together.
That's awesome.
Okay,
so I have a question I'm going to put up on the screen here is from Charles Wickham. at what PSI is the hydrogen in the engine? So I think what he means is, what PSI is it at when it gets injected in?
Yeah, so we run 350 bar in the tank, which is 5,074 PSI. We regulate it before the injectors, and right now we're at 8 bar. So that's about 115 PSI, and that's what we have on the top side of the injector.
Which, that's not crazy, actually.
No,
I mean, not at all. Nope. Okay, so, but here's a funny one. Here's a funny question from Mike Zelenko. He says, how do you know when you have a blown head gasket?
Well, if it ever did blow a head gasket, you know, because the coolant would still get in the cylinder.
That's true.
Still burn.
That's awesome.
One of the comments earlier, Chad, that somebody had mentioned was exhaust temperature.
Yes.
Right? So that was one of our concerns. That's part of why some of the specific components are in the engine. Analytically, when we looked at it, we had the potential to build extremely high exhaust gas temperature. So we built the engine with specifics around that. Okay. And like, you know, the pistons we run a shorter rod so we could get a bigger piston. We have piston oil squirters in it to help cool the piston. We run, you know, just all of the good things, right? Gapless rings, all of that stuff, right? And when we got this thing, as we've continued development with it, temperature is not an issue. We can control engine temperature and therefore exhaust gas temperature based on fuel mixture. So we run this thing in certain instances. And, you know, a typical gasoline engine optimum is 14.7 to 1. We've run this engine at 100 to 1.
Wow.
So 100 parts of air to 1 part of fuel.
Yeah.
We figured out, we've run tests, and we can actually control engine temperature with fuel mixture.
Now, and you and I have talked about this before. So, and Crosby has experience running mechanically fuel injected alcohol motors, you know, front motor dragsters and this kind of thing. And in those scenarios, you could control engine temp with fuel as well, right? But because you're literally just pouring massive amounts of it into the engine. But you're talking about like genuinely controlling engine temperature with the fuel. Could you do it enough to like not have to have a traditional cooling system in one of these?
I don't know. Maybe, you know, we've run 20-minute cycles and never turned on the cooling fans, never got over 152F.
Wow.
In the coolant temp.
Wow.
In 20 minutes of runtime based on fuel mixture. I can also go the other way and raise the temperature up.
Right.
So the interesting thing about that is we grow and as we get better in the future, there's the opportunity to warm cars up faster and to cool them down faster. Right. So you could theoretically reduce radiator size and fan package, fan draw, all of those things.
Well, if you keep the temperature down that low, Mike, couldn't you do like a circulating wet block scenario?
Oh yeah. Yeah, there's all of that, right? It's everything we learn leads to something else we want to learn.
Right.
That's interesting.
Right.
Now, okay, so we have there's so many great comments and questions on here. I want to make sure we hit them because it's one of the best things about this. Like, thank you everybody that's watching. Like, please ask your questions. I know I'm behind, so cool. We'll get to them.
I love seeing it.
Yeah, right? It's cool. So we can read them too. I'm going to put them on screen, folks, but we're all reading them. So my dad actually asked about what the fuel tank looks like. And that was the thing that I showed just a second ago. So this is what the fuel tank looks like. Now, this tank could be, you know, I mean, you could make this bigger, smaller, whatever, right?
Yeah. So that tank is 3 kilograms of hydrogen, which in a correlation, if you do the conversion to gasoline, is about 16 gallons of gas.
Okay. And so, how big is that? So that tank's 4 feet long, probably?
It's approximately 50 inches long and about 17 inches around.
Okay. Now, they have to be a cylindrical shape in order to be able to hold the pressure that's inside them. Is that right or no?
No.
Okay. Very
no,
cool.
They're that shape because they're everything that exists like that today. That's commonly that you can buy basically.
Right.
Is they're designed for fuel cell buses.
Right. So that
they actually
fits
mount
no
them on
problem.
the roof of buses.
Yeah. Right. That's the buses all have like those round cowls that are over the whole roof section on those hydrogen buses.
And that's
what I think
there.
when I see them. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
What kind of mileage can you get out of that tank?
Analytically, we haven't actually run it enough. We're just getting to convert to the real tank. We've been running on welding tanks full of hydrogen.
Mm-hmm.
So we're just now getting to the real tank. They manufactured, you have to use obviously special stuff, and they manufactured the line today. So Monday we'll be able to put that in. And, in our testing, 3 kilograms and analytically, we believe gives you approximately 3.5 hours of run time at 350 bar.
Okay.
So that's 250 miles.
Right.
It refills in 3 minutes.
Really?
That was what I was going to ask next. Okay. So, and how does filling your hydrogen compare to filling your propane tank? Right. People are familiar with filling propane tanks for their barbecue or their motorhome or whatever. So how does it compare to that?
It's kind of it's a quick connect deal. So the two most common pressures for hydrogen today are 350 bar, which we're at, and 700 bar.
Okay.
Most fuel cell vehicles, like the Toyota, the Nissan, they run at 700 bar.
Oh.
It's just twice as much pressure, twice as much gas. So you get twice the volume of fuel in the same container. So
now,
so do you think that's where you would go ultimately?
Maybe. Buses are at 350 bar, and we're at 350 bar. The problem with going to 700 bar is at 350 bar, you plug the tank in, it has a quick connect, you plug it in, and you hit the button and it fills the tank up. Okay. When you go to 700 bar, you have to have the tank has to communicate with the pump.
Oh.
So it communicates based on pressures and on temperatures. So that information is shared between the vehicle and the pump. And about half to 3/4 of the way through the fill process, the 700 bar system stops and then does a small cooling and then continues to fill to capacity.
Now, when you fill a hydrogen tank, does it build heat or does it cool down?
It actually builds a little heat because it's forcing huge volume through a smaller line.
Oh, okay.
Right.
So we basically fill through a 3/8 line,
Mm-hmm.
a number 6. So we fill through that. So, but we're pushing, over 5,000 PSI through it. So
now, if you fill a bigger line, would it control the heat a little bit better? Or?
A little bit. There's the pump controls based on flow. So it has its own brain. So it thinks as it does it. One of the things that this potentially, there's so many avenues and so many things that hydrogen can be used for. And in particular, our system can be used on any 4-stroke gasoline burning internal combustion engine. So it doesn't matter whether it's a weed whacker, it's a lawnmower, a boat motor, a generator. Our system could be used to run that. Okay.
Okay. And that opens up another question then. If this was a 2-stroke scenario, what would you do in that format? Would it have to be injection or?
Yes. Yeah, they have to be injected. Yep.
No, I mean for the whole process because it being a 2-stroke.
Because the 2-stroke has to have oil to inject.
2 strokes wouldn't run on it. The same as it doesn't. Diesels, and combustion ignition does not work with hydrogen.
Yeah, and now somebody asked about that earlier. If it doesn't like combustion, why does it work in a gasoline engine? And I think they just misunderstood that when you say combustion ignition, a diesel has no spark plug. So a diesel ignites because the compression ratio on a diesel is a jillion times higher than it is on a gasoline engine, and the timing of the engine is not ignition timing. It's controlled by the timing of the fuel going into the engine. And the reason that's important is because the fuel is being ignited literally because it reaches so much pressure that it explodes. So if you were to inject the fuel at the wrong time, then that explosion either wouldn't happen or would happen at the wrong time, which could be catastrophic. So the hydrogen just won't ignite on its own like that, or at least not efficiently. Is that the best way to describe it?
Yes, that is.
Okay.
I was just reading somebody's comment about
He's reading questions.
It's far less than 300 part per million CO2 for plants to grow. A quick Google search proves you're wrong. I don't know what point he's making.
Yeah,
So,
it is a beautiful LIFO said the combustion of hydrocarbons results in CO2 and water. If we reduce the ambient CO2 any lower, all plant life on Earth will stop growing. Anything under 300 parts per million and plants don't grow. Well, that is, I think she's referring to the when we were talking about the electrofuels, like Prometheus says that they're pulling CO2 out of the air in order to make hydrocarbons again.
Yeah.
And so she must be talking about that. But and I don't know enough about how they extract it other than from their website. So if you go to Prometheus Fuels, you'll see it. But Charles asks, does the truck have O2 sensors?
Yes. Yeah, we use wideband O2.
And so
it has 2 of them. So,
and you said you're doing Lambda, which lots of race tuners use Lambda.
So do OEs.
Yeah, exactly. Right. And I'm I don't use Lambda usually. I'm using a, typical AFR, and we all know that 14.7 is considered stoic, which is ideal, quote unquote. But that all depends on load and all of those things. If you were to read it in normal, quote unquote, air fuel, does it even register on that scale? Where would it be?
Well, it's between, we run a number of different levels, right, that we're playing with and learning.
Yeah.
But we've been as lean as 100 to 1.
Yeah.
And under normal circumstances, we have not gone richer than 60 to 1.
Wow. So the potential energy in hydrogen is considerably more than gasoline.
3 times.
3 times. Wow.
Yeah, approximately.
Yeah.
The other thing that's really cool about it is it burns approximately 3 times as fast. So if you go in and look at a traditional engine, like a 4 1/8 inch bore, 4 1/4 max, about the max RPM that they're efficient at from a gasoline burn rate is about 7,000 RPM. The efficiency falls drastically above that. I'm not saying you can't make power above that, but if you measure emission output and things like that, you're moving a bunch of fuel that you're not burning, because it physically takes that amount of time to create a spark and have it travel across the head of the piston and burn and use the energy of the gasoline. Right.
So what do you have to do with timing, Mike?
We've played with that. I don't really want to say where we're at now, but we've moved it all over the place.
Well, and I know that the camshaft specifications are I shouldn't say considerably different than, but they're definitely not what you normally would have for an LS3, right? So you are getting rid of overlap. Is that right?
Correct.
So you're trying to keep the intake charge completely separate from the exhaust side, because
hydrogen does not like revision.
Okay.
So if you blow, because it lights easily.
Yeah.
If you were to blow a spark back into the intake, it'll light.
Oh.
If you put any flame back in the intake, you're going to light the hydrogen. And because of the system we're currently running, we have a lot of hydrogen in the intake.
Right.
So, yep.
Now, so you're running an LS-based engine.
Yep.
And I know that you are going to be testing all these things, but the current crop of DI engines, right? Like, hold on, let me back up. We're talking about hot rods, right? Because we're hot rod people and we love hot rodding and racing and all those things. And we'll go into why this matters here in a minute. But this also has the potential to be a very big impact on late model vehicles as well. I mean, because there are entire systems that exist in new cars and trucks that wouldn't need to exist if there were no emissions, right? So we're talking about all of the rare metals that go into catalytic converters, the catalytic converters themselves, which are also not good for the environment. I mean, all of these other systems, EGR, all of that stuff that doesn't need to happen. So does it also then work on, or will it work on a direct injection, LT based engine?
Actually, analytically, it works better.
Okay.
So in a port configuration, the hydrogen, we have to move the hydrogen through the port to put it into the cylinder.
Right.
It physically takes about 20% of the port volume to move the hydrogen.
Oh, wow.
So you get 20% less air.
Right.
Which is where the horsepower decrease comes from.
Gotcha.
So when we go to direct
theory,
injected,
yeah,
we no longer have to do that. The other thing, and this is a point that I was going down before, this engine, because hydrogen burns approximately 3 times as fast, that efficiency, that 7,000 RPM bogey, which, is kind of that point where you exceed the RPM, exceeds the time that is required to physically burn the fuel.
Right.
So they go inefficient and create emissions. Theoretically, now that number is, instead of 7,000 RPM, is 20,000 RPM.
Yes, please.
So
I would like 300 cubic inches of small block Chevrolet at 20,000.
Yeah. So
RPM,
theoretically,
with a stick,
supporting component, we can run 20,000 RPM efficiently on the fuel.
Yeah.
Okay.
That has all kinds of other positive repercussions with regards to gear ratios, et cetera. And that actually gets me back to one other thing too. And this is so awesome. Like my brain is going everywhere, so one of the other things, we mentioned the heat earlier. So in 1969, they wanted a Camaro to run less than 200 degrees, right? 180 was like a magic number. But as time has gone on to 2018, 2020, 2022, they found that they want the engines to run it at 215, 220, 230, because the hotter it is, the less emissions there are.
It more thoroughly burns the fuel.
Right, because you are heating the fuel before ignition, so to speak, in that combustion chamber. But that is harder on all these other parts and less efficient on other parts, engine oils, et cetera, et cetera. So if we could would we want to get back to running a hydrogen engine at 175 degrees, let's say? Or is there a downside to that?
Or maybe 155 degrees?
Dude.
Where there's no negative?
So, and I might argue that, so I don't believe that electric vehicles, just solely electric vehicles, are our best option for the world, right? I think that some electric vehicles would be good. I think some internal combustion. I think hybrids are the most palatable and the most,
balanced at this point.
Balanced. Yeah. And like the most, useful, right? I guess is the way I would put it, right? It still allows you to use something to its normal potential. Okay. But if you were to take some of that technology and use some of that hydrogen fuel cell to make some of the power we need, right? Or because this engine's so efficient and heat doesn't become as much of an issue, you put a giant alternator on the thing. We heat cars with hot water from the engine, but why? We could heat cars with a power strip, a heating element, just like your house or anything else, which means it would never need to get hot enough to make the car hot and warm and toasty in the winter inside.
Yeah, dude, those are all byproducts of changing the main source. Right? Yeah. I mean, we physically inject hydrogen into our engine. We light it with spark plugs. It has coils, it has spark plug wires, it has spark plugs. We extract the energy from the fuel. We exit the burned exhaust gas out the tailpipes. And everything else is open to adaptation, interpretation, and optimization. So, we are treating this exactly the same way that an OE does when they do a new development program, right? We're doing 5-degree temperature threshold testing, doing 5-degree air temperature threshold testing. We're doing start crank cycle time testing. We're doing all of those same things that an OE does when they develop a new engine package or a new complete package, whatever it is, right? So we're running all of those tests. We're collecting all of that data. We are learning every single day. We have learned so much, We know that we can run hydrogen in the engine, and we know that it will run with 25 pounds of boost. We're only at 9 pounds right now, right? We know those things. Right. Others have tested them before us. One of the companies, some friends of mine reached out when we started down this path, and they had actually done some work, and they had tested on a 6-liter with a supercharger with 25 pounds of boost, and they could only make 128 horsepower.
Wow.
Right? There are a number of reasons why that was the case, but we've solved those. Right? Obviously, if we're over 400 on the tire, we pretty much figured out how to make more.
Right. Oh, absolutely.
And there's nowhere to go but up. As we get production level injectors, they're going to be bigger. So we're going to have, the ability to run 8 instead of 16.
Right.
Our computer has finite control. We have complete control. I mean, we're running electronic throttle. We have fuel mixture control with O2 sensors. I mean, we read map sensor. I mean, we do everything just like in a regular internal combustion, and we tune accordingly, right?
Okay, that's what I was going to ask. So, yeah, when this thing's running, it's running just like a new Camaro would or what have you. I mean, none of that is different. So I'm gonna bring up a picture here.
Hey, I need 1 minute, okay? Just give me 1 second. I'll be back. So show your picture.
Okay. So I want to show this picture so people can see that this is the engine in the truck. So Susie, you've seen this thing a bunch of times. Yeah, I mean and Crosby's looking at this thing going, yep, looks like every engine.
Crosby's looking in the fridge.
Oh, he is. He's getting beer, that bastard. So if you're watching right now and you're looking at this engine, so here, if you can see my mouse moving on the screen, is this silver plate that is below the black lid. That silver plate there is the spacer that Copeland was talking about that has the other 8 injectors in it, and you can see them right there. My mouse is right on top of one of the injectors. So the only things that are different on this engine from any other LS3 with a Maggie on it that you would see, in a 48 Chevy pickup is those injectors with that, intercooler spacer plate and this regulator.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So other than that, this is all the same stuff you would normally see if this was just running on gasoline. So what I was saying, Copeland, is this this silver plate underneath the lid of the supercharger is that plate, those 4 injectors on this side and 4 matching injectors on the other side. And this regulator on the firewall, those are the only items that are any different as far as visually than you would have if this was running on gasoline, right?
Yes. Yep, absolutely.
I mean, that to me is the part that's cool, because I want everybody to understand that this is, you're talking about an engine that's representative, I mean, I don't own a LS3 that has a Maggie on it, but I own a LS3 that doesn't, right? I mean, okay. You know what I mean? So my LS3 looks the same as that. I mean, generically speaking. And so it would be the same no matter what you had. Now, you can't run this carbureted though, right? I mean, that's not a doable deal. So it has to have.
Where's the fuel going to go, Chad?
Right. No, that's what I'm saying. It'll float right out of the thing, So you have to have a port injection or DI scenario. But if you had a traditional 4-barrel intake manifold that had 8 injectors in it and a 4-barrel throttle body on top of it, in theory, that could run on hydrogen once your systems are all developed for that, right?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yep. Yeah. One of the things we've learned, although we built a custom engine, right, with all kinds of parts for extreme temperatures and for, planned for extreme use, realize this is a development piece. And when you're developing, sometimes you take things out of their comfortable threshold.
Right.
And you push them to the limits, right? So one of the things that we quickly learned is that our system, you don't have to change anything in a traditional gasoline engine internally to run our system. Now, one of the tests that we're actually running right now, and that's part of having Redline as a partner, is we're doing oil testing, right? Because there's no carbon to get into oil. The oil theoretically will never get dirty.
Right.
So we're running tests on the oil to determine, is there better lubrication capability by changing some of the chemical makeup? How do you make it better? All of those different things. So we're testing that right now. Oil samples, we take oil samples, and Redline has some of the best chemists that I mean, they make your head hurt. They know so much about oil and stuff. So, but they can take that and take what we're testing and what we're learning and validate it. And is there a better way? Do we tweak it? What do we do? Right.
So one thing to me that's important about that too, you mentioned earlier, who you've worked with and that, this isn't some guy trying to launch himself, a flat earther trying to go to the moon on a steam powered rocket, right? Like that's just not how this is, right? This is legit. And somebody in here asked, isn't Mazda working on a hydrogen rotary engine? Now I have no idea.
I do.
Okay. So McTaggart, you talk about that. And then I want to talk about Ford. So yeah, go on.
Okay. So there's 2 main cars right now that you already know about, which is Toyota Mirai and the Honda Clarity, the current hydrogen fuel cell vehicles. Mazda, at least in the past, did look at 2 different versions of hydrogen power. They used what we know as the Mazda 5, the Mazda Primacy is what they call it everywhere else, as a standard hydrogen powered vehicle. And then they used an RX-8, modified it to run with a Renesas rotary as the RX-8 RE. And we're talking as far back as 2006, they were testing this thing in Norway, seeing how it would operate. Now, as far as current, because obviously that's nearly 20 years, 15, 20 years on, they are still pursuing hydrogen to a degree, but there's no, we know that they're working on rotary power. We know that they're kind of looking at it as a hybrid powertrain source. But to actually pinpoint it currently as a hydrogen-powered rotary, I don't know if they're continuing with that or not. But there's at least historical precedent for it.
Yeah, and that's an interesting thing because a rotary engine is so inefficient in so many ways. And I love a rotary engine. All you rotary guys out there, don't lose your shit and get all argumentative. They're really inefficient. in a whole lot of ways. And we all know that because you can put a 750 Holly on one, for God's sakes, and the engine's this big around. That doesn't make good, right? They are too damn loud too. So shut your mouth. But if hydrogen can, ignite that quickly that we could run a small block, if the crank rods and pistons would stay together at 20,000 RPM, then I got to think that hydrogen in a rotary is like, whoa, magic, right? So good. I'm down. Like, bring back I'll take one and put it in an old RX-7. But Ford, I found this incredibly interesting, and I know you know this, Mike. In the last 6 months or so, maybe a little longer, Ford actually put forth plans and patent applications, et cetera, for a hydrogen internal combustion engine. I found this
about it at SEMA.
Yeah, I found it interesting because of this. If all of the OEs, every major OE has announced that by 2035 they're all going to be all electric, then there's only two reasons for Ford to do this, okay? Reason number one, because they don't want somebody else to swoop in and be able to do this and change anybody's mind, so that they can instead still have internal combustion engines. Or number two, they don't believe that in 2035 that's going to be the case, and they believe that other technology will make people change their minds, and that hydrogen is that technology. Yeah, see, Susie's like, ding, 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 ding. I believe that as well. I believe that everybody losing their minds, and we talked about this on the EV show, which McTaggart and Crosby and I talked about, was our biggest viewed show yet, was the EV show, which was hilarious.
Watching the comments was a riot.
Oh, it was insane.
Oh, sure.
and I loved it because, I wanted to have that EV show to dispel some of the myths and tell people to just shut the hell up, right?
Right.
About a lot of stuff, it just doesn't matter. So, I don't know anybody today, and there are going to be 5 people that say, I do, and you're the 5 idiots that will drive 500 miles at a time. Nobody drives 500 miles at a time. If you got kids that'll ride 500 miles at a time, yeah, you don't have kids in the damn car with you, right?
You damn right.
Crosby got rid of his years ago. Me too. Right? They're gone, right? So, but if you had kids in the car, there is no way you're driving 500 miles, right? Because 2 things. A, they got to pee, and B, you're going to kill them if you drive 500 miles with them. I mean, hello? So that isn't an argument. Like, who cares, right? How far it will go does not bother me. I don't care if Mike's car or truck would go 100 miles on a tank of hydrogen. Sign me up, right? Because I hate to break it to you, but I got a 69 Camaro with a power glide and a 5500 stall converter and 456 gears and a 30-inch tall slick and a small block. And it won't go 200 miles on a tank of fuel. It won't, okay? Like, the only way it's going 200 miles on a tank of fuel is if the trunk has some jugs in it, okay? So, I don't care. This is my muscle car deal. The fact that it's clean, and that would make people not yell at me about having it like I'm killing the world, would be why I would want this thing. So your first order of business, Mike, when you get done dealing with all of these, weirdo combos, I want you to do the important one, which is with a tunnel ram or a roots blower. That's where we need to be. That's what I want to be the next one. Okay. And if you need it, I'll just bring the Camaro up. It'll be fun.
Yeah. Damn it, I was hoping your screen would freeze longer so I could interject, jump in, and get something from the barge.
Hydrogen works just fine with a roots blower, so that's not an issue. So
okay, I'll take that 6-1 flavor, please.
Yeah, exactly.
So, there's a lot to this, and we're on a path. My goal for my hot rod, because I'm a hot rodder, right? I mean, I've done my entire life. This is how I grew up, and this.
You're the only person that made a Rampage cool, yeah.
A lot of parts cool.
The hydrogen technology that we're developing and what we're working on could literally save 70% of the companies in the performance arena. You don't need pistons, you don't need connecting rods, you don't need camshafts, you don't need valve train parts, you don't need clutches or transmissions or torque converters with electric motors. They don't use them, right? The numbers float all over, but the conservative number is there are 90 million internal combustion registered vehicles in the United States. I've read that number as big as 290 million.
Yeah.
Yeah, SEMA has higher numbers.
Yeah, but even just to say 90 million, right? If our technology could save classic cars for the next generation of kids to enjoy, then it's all worth it to me, right? My wife and I funded this entire thing.
The numbers that go up if Chad would register his cars.
That's true. I own a lot of shit that's not registered.
The one thing that Mike makes a good point about, and it's preservation is good and all, I appreciate that. That's also reducing the amount of new materials that's going into new vehicle production. Yeah. Instead of, shit canning a bunch of cars that have no reason to be other than the fact that they're, old, there's a repurpose to them. And for once, it's a repurpose that actually makes common sense across the board in everybody's eyes. There's a performance potential. There's a clear green potential.
Yeah.
It's all there.
And that's the thing is this is not anti-gasoline. It's anti-carbon, right? It's anti-carbon footprint. It's anti-emissions. It's all these things that are going to save our planet. I don't know how it saves the planet to have 90, 190, however many vehicles suddenly go to the scrap pile.
Right. Well, because and that's a great point,
and
Susie.
Then all those new cars and engines have to be built.
Well, and the thing about it is, let's
longevity of these new cars.
100%. But here's the other deal. Think about this. So if if you take Mike's example, right, and you go, okay, if they made everything go electric in 2035, then if we made it that long before they said you can't drive anything internal combustion that's old, right? Because there would be that. They would grandfather people in and let you drive something that was 10 or 15 years old for a while because they couldn't make every American buy a new car. But they would very likely go, nope, you guys can, maybe you can still race your 69 Camaro, but you can't drive it, right? Whatever. Even if you fast forward 20 years from there to 2055, if there's no need for a bunch of these companies to make, like you said, camshafts, crankshafts, pistons, rods, etc., then they're all going to go away. And one thing that people don't understand, some people don't understand about the automotive aftermarket is that many of the companies that we all know and love that build high performance parts, and I'll use Molly Motorsports as the example. Mike knows there are two Mollys. Well, there's actually Molly and there's Mala, right? So Molly Motorsports, that's how everybody pronounces it. Mala is the parent company. They make every piston for all the Dodges, Hemis, for all the Chevrolets, high performance cars, for all this. They are the #1 piston ring manufacturer in the world by all of it. Like everybody else is this big in comparison, right? They make all of these things. Well, the reason why they can make pistons so efficiently for us, for hot rods, why they make rings so efficiently and cost effectively for us for hot rods is because they make 18 jillion of them for all of these OE cars, right? So if they're no longer doing that, then is there a reason for them to be in business to only sell us, rings for LS engines that we're building for our hot rods? No, that's the answer. Camshaft blanks, hate to break it to you, ladies and gentlemen, but Comp Cams doesn't make their own blanks. Either does Crowder, either does any of them, with rare exception. There are some limited run stuff they do, but otherwise they're getting Camcors blanks from the manufacturers that make 18 jillion of them for GM every year. So all of those kinds of things will go away if there is nobody to make these parts, because there's no need to make these parts. So the long-term view on this is, for that portion of our industry, is huge. But the other thing goes to what you said, Susie. Nobody wants to ruin the planet. Like nobody. Like
Right.
we all want clean air and clean water. Like, hello, who doesn't want that, right? We have created this adversarial relationship with the EPA, and it is not one-sided. It's not just us, and it's not just them. Anybody that's intelligent knows that this is a two-sided coin, right? But they are the ones in control, and if we don't do something, if we don't, Mike and I've had a lot of conversations about this too. If we don't start policing ourselves, if we don't start making active moves to doing better, then we're not going to get them to cooperate with us. I look at this, Mike, as being not only amazing technology and something we can hopefully all embrace that nobody will yell at us about, but I also look at this as the olive branch. Okay, this is a big deal. You have created a product and a process that is like, hey, look at us. We're hot rodders, but we're responsible. We're trying to do good for the environment. And at some level, even if it's only this big to start with, that has to make them look at us as an industry differently. I mean, and you've done this from the aftermarket side and the OE side. You know what the interaction with the EPA is like. And it's at a level that most people would never be able to grasp, right?
Correct. Yep.
I mean,
So
what do you have to do?
Add a little bit to yours.
Yeah.
Mala actually has, they're so big and they're in so many things. They have a full certified emission testing center in Michigan, and they've offered me access to it.
Ooh.
They're very excited about it. So if we stay to plan, in the next few weeks, we will be running full carb certification emission tests in their lab on my truck.
That's cool.
A huge deal. Absolutely huge deal for those who don't understand what that actually means.
Right. So
carb certification is not easy. It is almost destructive in many ways. So I'm very excited to see the results of that.
SEMA has been a huge, huge plus. Okay. They've supported it. They were a little slow to get on the bus, but once they got on, they slid in and they want to co-drive. So I'm happy about that, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
So we're making great strides. They're involved in a lot of things. There's it's public now. There's a new piece of legislation moving through California right now that says if you take an internal combustion vehicle and convert it to zero emission, if this law passes, the state of California will rebate the person that does that $2,000.
Yeah.
Right? SEMA was, I believe, solely responsible, although they're not taking all the credit for it. And I've worked with CARB, right? And we continue to work with them. But they've added hydrogen to that legislation.
And I think that's great.
They're listening to what we're saying. They're looking at what we're doing. And, we've been invited to come to California, to Riverside, to run the truck in their new test center. And we will do that at some point shortly.
Well, you better come visit then.
Exactly.
You better come visit then.
Yeah, you got to stop by Crosby's at that point.
Yeah. Well, we're going to try and put together a whole deal, right? So Susie's collected a whole pile of media that wants to see the truck and wants to do all those things and hear it run and everything.
What do we got to do to road trip it back?
Get hydrogen about every 250 or 300 miles.
Yeah, we have trucks and trailers. We can haul it. It'd be awesome.
Yeah. But,
to back up a little bit, I think to Susie's point that I don't think she got to make clear was what's cleaner, repurposing a vehicle that already exists or building a complete new vehicle, which is cleaner and more green and saving the planet.
Well, yeah.
Go ahead, Susie.
No, you go ahead, Mike.
I was going to say, the reality of this is, right, it's very easy to throw stones at what we call tree huggers and at the EPA and at all of those people, right? It's very easy to throw stones from our side. The reality of this is exactly this. When I contacted SEMA last year and told specific people, because I wanted to control. It's one thing to say you can do something. It's something completely different to do it.
Yeah.
100%.
There are people in our industry who like to say they can do something and take the reward from that, and they couldn't do it in a lifetime. Okay. So I wanted to really control who knew what we were doing. And SEMA was not as receptive as I felt they should have been. And they didn't, jump up to the party and everything. Now, in their defense, and they were 100% right in this, until I did this, nobody has.
Right.
Right.
Uh-huh.
So they looked at it and had their reservations, and I can understand and appreciate that. People that know me know I don't bullshit, and they know that failure is not an option in my world. Right. If I say I'm doing something, you can plan on being there to drive it. Right. And in this case, they were a little slow to the gun, but I will say, and we had some pointed conversations. And but once they came on, they are 100% in. And I can't say enough good about the people at SEMA and how much they've supported this, how they're working to make sure that they can help us do what we need to do. Right now, SEMA's coming. Right, it's early for me to talk about SEMA because I'm Mr. 10 weeks. Right, and
yeah, why would you start talking about SEMA in May? I mean,
yeah, and I'm
wow.
I'm getting too old, I think. So each year it just gets harder to do that 10-week deal. And we are bringing a new technology to SEMA this year. It's hydrogen based.
Okay.
It's a new technology. We will debut it there. And it's going in a 64 Falcon, so you can kind of follow some of that build on Facebook and other social media. Susie will be putting some stuff out on it, and we'll be doing some of that stuff. But we're going to debut a new technology.
What's the power plant?
It's a Ford Coyote.
Ooh, cool.
And we have some new Hemi stuff we're working on with hydrogen. We probably won't bring that to SEMA. We might bring it to PRI. Okay. And
Dan Parker, you're my hero. That's the greatest thing ever.
Oh my God.
Sorry, I got to post that one. I couldn't help myself. I'm just going to say Dan Parker says it's amazing what you can accomplish when you take quitting off the table. And then I'm not going to say the rest, but it's awesome.
So anyway, so we're going to be there with that. If things continue down a path and we're able to keep making progress like we are, I have my own personal goal is to be able to announce in our reveal when retrofit packages will be available.
That's
for people
awesome.
To purchase.
And the retrofit packages. Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Crosby.
I'll make you an offer, Mike. If you're out here,
Get in line.
You're and you're out there testing. You need a shop to work on something. You're more than welcome.
I appreciate that. I really do.
You're
I thought you were going to ask for a system.
Oh,
no,
that's going to be me. Come on.
I want to ask. I want to ask about the systems because. So Chevrolet, GM announced that Lingenfelter Performance would be managing their EV, what I'm going to call their EV crate motor package for the very first time in history. Actually, correct to call it a crate motor, by the way. Always has driven me nuts. But anyway, and I've been very vocal, literally within 24 hours of them announcing the program and everything they've talked about since about how they're just doing it wrong and they're just missing the boat on that deal. Are these kits going to be a kit where somebody can do this installation themselves, or will they have to go to, an Arrington certified installer shop, or what?
The first ones will do.
Right.
But the goal is that we would be able to deliver a package that you could just bolt into your car and go.
Awesome. I love that. I love it.
That's the ultimate goal. So,
and that's how it should be.
It should be no different than installing fuel injection on a carbureted car.
right. There's
Right.
some more safety to it, right? So, and we'll
Right.
we'll provide safety information and all those things to people and what they need to do. But you know, that's the goal. I have a lot of fleets that want to convert to hydrogen. Bus fleets, police car fleets, all of that stuff. So we'll use some of those to
Test.
help test with and help create a savings of scale. You know, there's a lot of potential of this and a lot of opportunity. So I'm not going to tell you who, but
Right.
one of the OEs has asked to see my truck.
Wow. Okay, I love it. That's cool.
So,
And I think, and Bosch has to love that, and Redline's got to love that. Like everybody involved. I mean, Bosch has to really want this to happen at every level because clearly they're, you know, if they're creating the electronics, the parts, and everything that goes along with this, that's a big deal.
yeah, they could not be more supportive. Bosch
That's
has just been a fantastic partner. A gentleman named Charles Moore is in charge of that department that's working with me. And he's at my shop literally every week.
That's
we're
awesome.
talking on the phone multiple times a week. I mean, he's 100% committed to it. He's a true engineer, you know, and people joke about engineers, but I can't imagine, you know, where we would be if we didn't have them. Right. And he's a great guy and super knowledgeable. He listens. There are things there analytically, when you analyze what we're doing and you look at how we do it and what we're trying to accomplish and all of those things, there are pieces that I want to accomplish and there are paths we go down that the analytical work tells you not to do. And I'm not that person, right? You know, you kind of have to prove to me I'm wrong. Don't just tell me. And Charles has been fantastic from that standpoint. He, you know, when I asked to try things and asked to do different things, he's right in there. And when we make this work, a huge part of why it will work will be Charles.
Which Mike was telling me today, which I thought was super cool, is that now he has become an internal proponent for what Mike is doing within Bosch Global.
Oh, right.
Which, you know, that's a pretty slow ship to turn.
Oh, yeah. Dan Parker has another good question. So he says, how does it compare as far as, I can't believe we didn't even ask this yet. How does it compare as far as cost to running gasoline? Is it 10% cheaper per mile or per, you know, tank or whatever, or more expensive or what?
Well, if you use California numbers pre the war, before that,
right?
You can't apply any logic to anything that's going on today.
No.
But if you go pre that, so last year when we debuted the truck at SEMA, 87 octane in California was average price about $5 a gallon.
Okay. And
I use California because that's really the only place that has public hydrogen filling stations.
Oh, right. Okay. Gotcha. Yep.
And so you buy hydrogen by the kilogram, but if you do the conversion and break it down, 87 octane unleaded was about $5 a gallon. Hydrogen was about $3.50 a gallon.
Wow.
Our fuel economy numbers analytically are comparable.
Right.
The truck is about 16 miles to the gallon right now.
Yeah. Which, if that was, well, yeah, that's really good, actually. Yes.
I was going to say for Maggie LS. Yeah.
Yeah.
Right.
So, wow. So it is considerably cheaper.
About 30%.
Yeah. And let's be real here. The system that you have on the truck, fast forward 2 years from now, let's say, and that's, you know, it's available retail. It's not going to be a cheap product, right? I mean, obviously there's expense to this. And as we go over years and years, obviously it'll get cheaper as Bosch makes more of the things. Everything gets cheaper. We all know that. But even with that said, if you bought it for the cost savings, it would pay for itself in a few years if you drove enough. But really, the point of it here is not that part of it. The real point is that we then have a hot rod that still runs on an internal combustion engine, that still makes real horsepower, and does not have emissions, so nobody can yell at us for ruining the planet.
Right.
Right?
It could literally save all automotive racing.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, it would not take much to develop a refilling process for, as example, NASCAR, where we could refill a hydrogen tank equal to 3 kilograms or 16 gallons of fuel, that we could refill that. I believe we could realistically do that in under 30 seconds.
Yeah.
Right. I mean,
Never mind who wants to watch NASCAR with no noise.
Yeah.
Oh, it would be, yeah. Because you've said in a couple of articles and stuff and interviews that you've done, Mike, about, electric cars and how, you use the Mustangs, the whatever, I can't remember what, the Cobra Jetty as the example. I mean, that car is totally impressive. It hauls ass. It's badass. It does wheel stands. I mean, it's as cool as any gasoline powered, that body style Mustang is from a visually leaving and going perspective. But all you hear is the tires. Yeah. I mean, you do hear
a
on that
slight
one,
bit of whine. That's it.
Yeah, because that one does have a real transmission and rear end in it and everything. So you do hear some gear noise through there, but it's not very much. Now you take Garlett's Dragster, which unfortunately just burned to the ground, a few weeks ago. If you take that thing, what's up, Jay? If you take that thing and you listen to it run, it's got tons of noise through the transmission and the gears and all that, but none of it's good. Like none of it. None of it's exciting to hear.
There was an article a couple years ago that I had to read for something else that talked about the billions of dollars in design and engineering to F1 cars once they went to hybrid, because nobody wanted to watch F1 if they didn't get that full screaming whine of a noise when it passed by. What if they put all those billions of dollars into something that made noise?
Right.
Yeah.
I mean, certainly if they gave it to Mike, we'd be a lot further along.
Oh yeah. Well, so one of the things too that I wondered about. So, I know this is going to be right now, this would be high, but I guess if I owned a fleet, let's just say, Mike, I owned a fleet of bread delivery trucks, right? I'm La Brea Bread Company in Southern California, right? And I'm delivering bread all over, with my box vans, which, some of those are diesel powered with a 4BT or 6BT Cummins, and some of them are going to be 6-liter Chevy powered, right? So let's assume all of them are 6-liter Chevy powered. So I'm going to put in your system, and I want to have at the bakery the hydrogen filling station, right? Like I want to make my own hydrogen and put it in. What does that cost, and what does that entail? I mean, is that like a big giant ass thing to make hydrogen, or is it a relatively small thing? I mean, what is it?
It's pretty good size, but it's driven by the volume of hydrogen you need. How many vehicles you have and how fast you need to generate it to refill, right? So, like at an Amazon station, they run, they generate the hydrogen outside in a big storage tank, and then they pipe it throughout their facility where you pull your high-low in, hook up the same connector that we use, and then refill the tank in your high-low.
So does the operator, and for those that don't know, a high-low is a forklift.
Yeah.
I mean, basically. Yeah. So does the operator go, oh shit, my high-low's out of fuel, and pull up and just fill it themselves? Or do they have like a person that's responsible for that?
No, they do it themselves.
Okay. Yeah. So it is hook it up and it does it and it's cool.
Yeah. Well, and even in the truck, right? So because hydrogen, we use it as a gas, not as a liquid. Okay. Right. So, and because it's pressure based, we have a 5,000 PSI transducer in the tank.
Yeah.
And actually in one of the valves at the tank. And we output that signal to a fuel gauge that Classic Instruments created. If you don't know, I have a 55 Olds dash in the truck.
Yes.
So I cut all the original dash out and we built a 55. I love it.
Me too. It's awesome.
Gorgeous.
Yeah, I'll find a picture because it is rad.
Classic Instruments built all the gauges for me for it. And the fuel gauge actually operates off of that 5,000 PSI pressure transducer. So we know how much hydrogen's in the tank based on pressure.
That is cool. So, well, you know, and that's the stuff that you wouldn't think about, right? You're like, oh, I didn't know I'd have to do that. You know what I mean? But yeah, that's pretty cool.
Yeah, that's the advantage to working with pros, right? So,
no, there's a better one.
Of the dash? That's the only one I have.
Yeah, that one's a little funky. That steering wheel don't go up that high.
Yeah, well, I'm sure it's with the wide angle, lens on the camera.
So, somebody got one that was straight on.
Anyway, it's I mean, I love that. You know me, I like to push the boundaries on everything. So I'm not content with status quo. So
well, I know that the number one response I got at SEMA, and I want McTaggart, I know, is going to say the same thing about the truck, was that when I started talking to people about the truck, they're like, if they weren't at the debut, at your big announcement, they're like, it's what? Yeah. Oh, I saw it. It's a badass truck. I thought it was another one of Copeland's amazing builds. I didn't know it ran on hydrogen. Yeah. Right? Didn't you hear that, McTaggart?
48 or 49 Chevy.
Yeah, I heard that a lot.
McTaggart has us muted, so he's talking and he looks lovely.
Yeah.
I'm glad I was muted for the last thing I said. But no, it's like outside of the one badge that you really have to have a close-up on to read.
Yeah.
It's a 50, it's a Chevy.
Yeah.
You see it, it's gorgeous, but you don't see anything spectacular. Nothing stands out that says, I'm green, I run on hydrogen. You have to look hard.
Well, and I assume that was a conscious decision, right, Mike?
Absolutely.
Because you wanted people to relate to this thing because it's a hot rod, not, oh, look at me with my gimmicky whatever.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Yeah. And that was why it was, that was part of the driver behind building the truck, right? Trucks are hot. It's my wife's, as you said in the start of the show. She loves it. She waited years for me to build it because, oh yeah, I have tons of customers and they get in the way, right?
Right.
So, but it was an opportunity to do that.
Oh, to stop.
You did a lot of research on
I wanted to build a high end. Most everything we build is high end, and especially if it's SEMA based, and it has the best of everything in it. There's not a single corner cut, right? And the fact that we could put it on hydrogen and it doesn't destroy it just makes it a bigger win-win for me.
Right. Now, okay, so has she gotten to drive it yet?
She has not. So I think there's only a few of us that have actually driven it.
Right.
But, she will. I mean, she asked me, we live in Michigan, and there's a restaurant there called Baker's, and Baker's does a Sunday car show, and it's world known. I mean, people from all over the world come to Baker's, and we go there in the Rampage. We went there a couple of weeks ago in the Rampage, and people kind of flip out when they see the Rampage driving down the street, and then, you get that. And then I get the people that, that when I first built it, that said, this is nothing but a show car and nobody will ever drive it. And nobody, God forbid that, that anybody would ever race it.
Yeah.
And so you get all of that. And then then I see somebody post a picture of it, in the parking lot, and they're like, oh, I've seen that before. Why are you posting another picture of it? Anyway, so my, we were there, Deb went with me, and we were there, and she says, are we going to be able to drive the hydrogen truck here? And I said, absolutely. Later this year, we're taking it to St. Ignace in June. There's a big car show in St. Ignace up in just past the bridge into the Upper Peninsula. We'll be there with the truck, and we take our motorhome because we stay in that with the dogs. But I'm taking the Rampage to drive. So we have something to go to restaurants and drive around and everything. And then we're taking the truck to actually put in the show and display it. So
that's awesome. I love it. Well, What's the number one response that you get to the truck when people realize that it's running on hydrogen, or just in the entire project in general? What do people say typically?
People they have to wrap their mind around it, right? To many people, they want to go straight to some negative thing that they knew something about. If I had a nickel for every time I've heard, oh, another Hindenburg, is it going to explode? That kind of stuff, right? But the real people, the people that actually, spend the time to go think or to go look or to go do whatever, right, to understand it. I get so many people that are so in love with it and think it's such a great idea, and that it is not unrealistic, in particular in the political climate that we deal with daily now. It is not unrealistic to have a law passed that makes gasoline illegal.
Right.
It is not unrealistic to have that happen, right? This is an option. It could be the only option.
Yeah, and because here's the thing. I'm a firm believer that gasoline and the oil companies, I believe that the oil companies have a stranglehold on Americans, and I believe that the way that gasoline is priced, and because we're here at the home of capitalism, I believe that everybody's entitled to a profit, but I do not agree with the profits that gasoline companies make when you consider that everybody in the United States of America, with very rare exception, is beholden to to the gas pump. We are. Whether it's good, bad, or otherwise, it's the truth, right? We all need gasoline in order to, live and get to work and do all those things. And so, and some smart ass right now is going, oh, I need diesel. And I'm, blow me, right? Like, shut up, you idiot. So but the deal is that, as soon as somebody gets tired of that, right, in the government, like you said, and they go, you know what, we're done. We're not doing this anymore. We are not going to be beholden to you. Then I agree with you. I think that anything is possible. And I think that we are the low-hanging fruit as automotive enthusiasts. We are the easy target, right? So if we don't do something actively on our own, then I think we just continue to be the easy target. We can yell and scream all we want. What do you say, Crosby?
Gonna wait for the government to do it, because they're not gonna.
No,
it's got to be the private sector.
I have always said, at Arrington, right, we don't remove catalytic converters. We don't violate EPA laws, right?
Right.
I turned $50,000 plus jobs down because I won't do that.
Yep.
Right. And I'm just not going to do it. And I've said forever that I want to be the poster child, not the wanted poster.
Yeah.
So
on this, you and I agree. I've told people all the time. I said, look, you don't post on Facebook that you robbed a bank. Why? Because robbing a bank is a federal crime. Well, you know what else is a federal crime, all you monkeys out there? Removing a catalytic converter from any vehicle that came with one from the factory, regardless of whether your state, county, city, or otherwise enforces emissions laws. It is a federal law that you cannot remove or tamper with an emission control device. So again, you wouldn't post up
emission control device.
Correct. Yes, that is true. But everybody gets into all of this, I'm going to post all these things that I'm doing. It's like, can't you keep your damn mouth shut? You know what I mean? I mean, I think about it now and think to myself how easy it is for parents to catch their kids doing dumb shit because their kids are too stupid not to post it on Facebook. And the best part about it is that they go, oh, my mom and dad don't look at Snapchat because they think that's dumb. Yeah, you know why we think it's dumb? Because you're on it doing dumb stuff, but that doesn't mean we're not smart enough to follow you. I mean, for the love of God. So yes, so I agree with you wholeheartedly because Mike, you have a lot more to lose than somebody that owns some little tiny shop, right?
I'm not going to do it. It's that simple, right? I'm just not. And one of the other things that there are specific ways you apply for EOs and you apply for these kinds of things, right? So we've worked really hard at that. My goal is that when we get our EO and people are able to go in and because we have no exhaust after treatment, because it doesn't matter what you do with air induction, so many of those things, as long as you don't physically find a way to inject oil or something that creates carbon monoxide, carbon dioxide, or hydrocarbons, as long as you don't add something that physically puts that into our engine package, any part that they manufacture will be able to go after an EO off of our EO to support any vehicle with our package in it.
Right.
So,
I mean, how cool would it be? How cool would it be to be able to, in 5 years, buy a kit to put on a 22, C8 Corvette that makes it zero emissions. And like you said, which means then that, Precision Turbo offers a twin turbo kit for one as well, and blah, blah, blah. And all of it piggybacks on the EO. And we can have brand new cars that don't have to have that. I mean, it is a game changer. The possibilities are a game changer. Well, absolutely.
Chad, it's not the fact that they don't have to have it. They won't need the emissions control at that point.
Well, no, that's true. If the OEs adopted this, they could get rid of entire systems on the car. I mean, there's no doubt about that. Now, Mike, better than anybody how long it takes for, we'll use General Motors as the example, to test new engines and all those things. I mean, how many years do they test an engine before it goes into a vehicle for the public?
Yeah, it's typically about 5 years.
So this kind of thing, if Chevrolet decided we want to make new cars that run on hydrogen, this is a 5 year plus kind of deal for them. So they have to be committed to it, and they have to really set forth in order to do that. But I have to think that if you look at how expensive, yes, you're trading some parts, right? But I have to think that at the scale that you're talking about with General Motors or Ford or Chrysler or whatever, those different parts would just be different parts. Like the price would end up going down, but there'd be a bunch of stuff they don't have to get, like catalytic converters, for example, right?
Well, I mean, it would literally, if they started today, and even if it took them 5 years, which they could probably shorten that time frame, and let's just say that it took them 3 years, right? It will take 3 years to get a hydrogen infrastructure across the country, right? Now, I've been invited to come to a specific state, and speak in front of their legislators about hydrogen and about our program.
Right.
So that's a start, right? The states they can either make it really, really difficult to have hydrogen, or they can make it really, really easy to have hydrogen, right? So the fact that they invited me to come there and speak about our program and what we've created and what the potential is, to me is a huge opportunity, right?
You spoke earlier, Mike, about a certain car company that wanted to talk to you more.
Yeah, they want to see my truck.
Yeah. There's a reason why, because you can not only give them a date and a time when it can be done, you can give them a year, when most of these companies with their internal involvement can't do that.
That's true.
Yeah,
that's true. You can show them a working prototype way quicker than they would be able to do that.
Yeah,
internally.
We have a live driving, proof of concept.
Yes, exactly.
Right.
You've taken at least a year and a quarter out of their productions, their cycle for that.
Yeah, if not
You're
more.
Being nice.
Well, and you you said it earlier that you guys have, done this entire process like you would have done this if you were at GM, like OE level. And I imagine that you have to do that when you're dealing with Bosch at the level that you are. Like, they wouldn't want to have you do it any other way either, because the implications, the potential of this is so much bigger than you or me or us, that you'd be doing it all a disservice if you didn't start out doing it at that level.
Right. Well, and it's all a learning set, it's all learning.
Yeah.
I mean, we have, if I'd have listened to the people that told me that have worked in hydrogen before and told me that you can only make 120 horsepower and you can't do this and you can't do that. If I'd have listened to all that, I'd have never went down this path.
Right.
I mean, you probably have at least a rough idea how much money I've spent, right?
I was going to say, literally, it was my next thing was to say, you've had to have spent an exorbitant amount of money on this. And let's be clear too on one thing. And I make fun of you all the time for this. And for everybody watching, Mike and I are personal friends. Like, you have done me amazing favors. I have done you favors. You have more contacts than anybody I have ever known, and I use them whenever I need to. But I say this because you've retired twice, okay? You retired from General Motors, and if you weren't the kind of person you are, you could absolutely have just put you and Deb in a motorhome and taken the dogs, traveled around, went and raced your Jeeps in the sand, and just lived the retired life and been a perfectly happy camper, except it would have drove you nuts 6 minutes in, right? So you stopped retiring to run Lingenfelter Performance for a few years, and then you retired from there and then decided that buying Arrington was a smart deal. And then that's just snowballed from here. Oh, and by the way, family business, Diversified Creations, which your son and Deb run and all that. I know you've tried to hand more of that off, but that you've failed miserably. The only thing you fail at is not working harder. You're really crappy at that part.
I am.
But the reason I bring that up is because you don't need to do any of this. Again, you could just be retired and whatever happens, happens. I mean, so yeah, I mean, when you said earlier, you're doing this so that, your grandkids and my grandkids and everybody else can have this. I mean, that's really the only reason. You don't need to do this.
Yeah. I don't, but somebody has to.
And the thing I've appreciated from this build from the moment I've seen it is that kind of detail. If you've never seen any of Mike's other vehicles, and the Rampage is the one that comes to my mind immediately because, again, taking an Omni with a bed and turning it into something everybody goes completely insane for is a feat by itself. The detail is there from any angle you look at it. And the fact that he's taken that attention to detail, plus his work ethic, because the only time I've ever seen him rest is at SEMA. But you add all that together and he's put it towards something that is basically, of course, now the word's family, this is not just for him. This is for everybody. This is future work. Of course, again, this is why I write and I don't speak too much. But again, this is not just for him. This is for everybody. This is a technology he's built.
This opens up a lot of new doors.
A lot of new doors. And for him to do that on basically his personal project and get to the point where he's talking to governments and he's talking with OEs and he's kind of spreading this all around so that people can get excited about something that a lot of people, manufacturers included, are kind of written off as, okay, it's hydrogen, whatever, we're going to see the batteries. That's a hell of a thing to do. One person getting that kind of attention and making that kind of impact is phenomenal. That's really underrating it.
Wow.
Before I froze up and Chad was talking about, one of the first things that we heard at SEMA from people or what a common, and I'm out there with all the trolls, right? I'm out there on social media, trying to make as few waves as possible. But one of the first things that always comes up is, I had a chem teacher in 1965, and his uncle was driving a car powered by hydrogen, but he got dead. Well,
I heard that a lot.
Yeah, it's I don't know if it's true, or the other one is big oil will stop this. Well, nobody went at it like Mike did, right? I love to tell people he is not some Einstein-haired crazy guy in his basement.
Right.
He's doing this at the level of a major auto manufacturer. The testing, the analyzation, all of that. And as far as big oil goes, what else are they gonna do with gas stations?
Right.
Well,
they have an in-play distribution system.
Right. Well, and you and I, Susie, have had extensive conversation about the oil industry and the profits they make and all that. And I learned stuff from you that I did not know. And more stuff about stuff I knew, but not to the extent. I was like, wow, okay, so it was a great conversation. But we have to remember that we are a society that is absolutely just, embroiled in the world of gasoline and diesel fuel. And so all of these things are, anything that threatens that, it feels like it's got to have this huge mountain to climb, as if the technology wasn't hard enough.
And
so
hold on to it.
Oh yeah. Like we get so angry, and car guys, we're horrible about it. It's like, damn, you don't tell us we can't have gasoline. And I'm like, give a shit what it is. If I can pump it in the tank, hook it up, whatever, if it makes all the noises and I can smoke the tires, rock on. Yeah. Like that's what I care about. And honestly, there have been some people in our industry and in the media that I think they've bitten off such a anti anything else deal that they have buried themselves so deep in gasoline that I think they can't even get behind this, and I say that sucks to be you.
It does. And you can usually kind of explain to them that this is our future. This is, Mike is, I'm overstating it by saying single-handedly, but certainly from a pocketbook standpoint, is single-handedly going to be the savior of the ICE platform.
Yeah, I don't disagree. I think that at some point, if 20% of what you want to do with this, Mike, happens, it will change the world. And quite frankly, I'm one of those people, and you and I have had these conversations as well. I'm one of those people that believes that no matter how small the impact, if you leave this earth having made some small impact and left it a little better than you got here, you're doing it right. I know that there is no doubt in anybody's mind you've done that already. If you then do this, like you literally could be somebody that I would get to say, I knew Mike Copeland and he changed the world. Mm-hmm. And I know that's not why you do it, but it sounds like so extreme, but the truth of the matter is, this has the potential to be that big of a thing. Is that intimidating to think about it like that, Mike?
Well, you give me a lot of credit, and it's a lot more than me, right? I know. Yes. It's a blessing to have the friends and the contacts and the acquaintances and all of those things I have. You mentioned earlier the people I know in my Rolodex, right? I tell people all the time, yes, I have a cell phone that most people would kill to have access to. The only thing more important than having the number is that they answer when you call.
Yeah, right.
And I'm very fortunate that way. And I've been able to surround myself with really talented people.
But it takes somebody like you, Mike, to put all this together.
Right. Because quite frankly, if Crosby and I thought of this, and trust me, Crosby and I have come up with some pretty genius things, okay, that don't involve making beer cold, right? But we don't have the resources and the clout.
The gravity, yeah.
Yeah, there you go. That's a good way to put it, McTaggart. to pull something off like this. So that in itself is a big deal. So Dan Parker has an sort of off topic thing, but you brought it up.
He is still cracking me up, by the way.
Oh, he is. He's the best. So Dan is, if you don't know, Dan Parker, again, the world's fastest blind man, and he is legitimately blind as a bat. So Dan says, can somebody describe the Rampage to me? So Dan, if you remember what a Dodge Rampage is, it was the front wheel drive little ute that looked like a Daytona on the nose.
It's a Dodge Omni with a bed. Yeah, it's a Dodge Omni with a pickup bed.
Right. And it was, it was a little economy car. I don't know if the trucks came with the 2.2 liter and a turbo, but anyway, they were not a performance car. But Copeland took one, and first he took all the engine and everything out of the front of it and then set a late model Gen 3 Hemi in the front of it sideways, sent me a picture of it, and then put it on the internet, and everybody lost their effing minds. Like, what are you doing? It's the wrong way to go. I mean, everybody lost their minds. Jeez. I mean, it was like, what in the hell? Like, he had stuffed the cylinders with kittens. I mean, it was like, what are you doing? And then, because Mopar people, you're weirdos. Mike can't say it. He sells Hemis to you, but you're weirdos. I know, because McTaggart is right over there, and he's one too. Okay, but anyway.
Don't play with Buick people.
Yeah, right? Oh, my God. They're worse. We know them. Anyway,
yes.
So, Mopar people, Buick people. So anyway, Mike took the Rampage. He put the Hemi in the rear, right behind the cab area, mounted up to a transaxle. And what is the rear end assembly that's under it?
It's a Mendiola 5-speed.
That's right.
Yeah.
And this thing has stack injection on it, so individual runner injection. It looks absolutely sick. It's ultra clean. It is this wonderful, like, metallic, cool orange color. It sits low and mean. It's got fender flares on it, but tasteful. Like, if Mopar built this today, this is how it would be. It hauls ass. It has air conditioning. It's got all the accoutrement. Like, you get in it and drive it like a normal car. My fat ass fits in it. And it is great. And so, yeah, Dan Parker, at some point when you're where we are and the Rampage is there, we'll make sure you get a ride in it, because it's a cool little car. How much power does it make?
650.
And it weighs what?
It's 3,000 pounds, with full tank of fuel and everything. It's got 60% of the weight on the rear. So it's 60-40. It's, we have 4-inch wide flares, all handmade steel that we built all the way around it. It sits about 4.5 inches off the ground. It's got 14-inch rotor XTR bare brakes, 6-piston calipers all around it. I had it at 160 down the long straight at Circuit of the Americas.
Yeah, it's badass.
This is the only car anybody's ever dragged me to see ever. Yeah,
that's true. And
I still don't know who figured it out. I don't even know the person who did it. I genuinely don't know who actually was the guy dragging me in. Somebody recognized me and went, Copeland built you a car, called me into the convention center. And well, you're not wrong, but because I'd never heard of it. I never saw the front wheel drive image. I never heard a peep about this car until it was done.
And see, Mike's sending me text messages all the time with pictures, and I'm drooling, Yeah,
he's
just
messing with you.
And he doesn't start until 6-8 weeks before SEMA. So
that's the thing.
Well, yeah.
Yeah. I mean, why would you come on? Why do today what you can wait until tomorrow?
Literally, when we finished that truck, I had never sat in it because it didn't have seats when I left. I always go into Vegas the Thursday before, and Pilot Transport hauls all of my cars for me. So they always have to double driver them because we're always on the last minute. And so they loaded it like late on Friday night. And so it arrived in Vegas on Sunday. I'd never sat in a seat. I'd never driven it. I'd never anything. So we did SEMA show with it. I won a golden ticket. The show was over. I climbed in it and fired it up. Of course, I helped, Redline tear their booth down, so I don't go do the parade thing. But I fired it up, drove it through the convention center around all the booths being torn down and everything else, drove it out into Vegas, fought rush hour traffic out to get on the expressway. And I dropped the hammer on it and drove to Las Vegas Motor Speedway and beat that thing like a rental all weekend long.
It was awesome.
On Sunday night, I drove it into the car hauler to ship it back to Michigan.
It was so good.
Job.
Okay, Mike Zelenko is asking, is there any body flex occurring with this? And so what did you guys do to make this thing stiffer?
The Rampage, it has a full tubular steel chassis under it.
Yeah.
So
it is
integrated
much
roll
more
cage.
rigid.
People, a lot of people bitch about the console in it. Oh, the console's too big. They don't understand its structure.
Yeah.
So it's DFM design structure.
Yeah.
So it's actually there for a purpose. And then in addition, all of the lines run through it. So radiators in the front, engines in the back, all the radiator lines, all the AC lines, all of the wiring, all of the electronics and everything that go front to back all run through that structure.
Well, I did the opposite with the 32. I put the motor in the front and the radiator in the back.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And the best thing on the 32 is that anybody that pulls up behind it is like, what? Because it has a giant circle opening where the fan is inside the rear under the spoiler, under the whole deck lid wing. And so you wonder if it's a jet engine back there or whatever. The thing runs dead cold all the time, by the way. It's amazing. It cools like a champ. So, yeah.
That's the great part about the Rampage. 100-degree day.
Yeah.
Putting it on the track, and it sits on a 180 stat.
Yeah.
That's
because
so
there's
cool.
no engine preheating a radiator.
Yeah, I did have to actually reseal the structure and all the interior panels because it would transfer heat and let it out between the panels, and it would get hot in the cab. So you had to run the air, to cool the cab down.
Right.
So I fixed all that, so now we control the heat, so it doesn't come out anymore.
Well, I got to put a better shifter boot on the 32 because that's where the heat comes from.
I'm on my third one.
I just modified mine this week. It was killing me.
Did you?
Yeah.
That is so fun. And it's so true, though. It's those little things.
Well, I kept thinking I left the heater on.
Yeah.
So
I have 20 cars. I have some cool stuff.
You do.
Yeah.
So do you still have the truck, the Canyon?
Yep. Yeah.
I love that thing.
It's sitting in one of my barns. It's got, it's all twin turboed and everything. So I have a 2100 horse LSX that we built that was going to go in it.
Yeah.
But now I have a new Hemi that we're working on.
To put in it?
Yeah.
Oh, that'd be awesome.
Yeah.
That'd be great.
Like 2,500 plus.
Shit.
So
I'm clear the coolest guy in the room.
if for people that are out there, they want to get an example of Mike. So Mike, while still working at GM, buys a GMC Canyon standard cab pickup truck. He's going to build it and set it up to go on drag week with it. So Mike puts this thing together and it comes out and it's beautiful, right? This beautiful yellow truck. I make the mistake of going, oh my God, yeah, what did you guys do? Just re-clear this thing like it's so pretty or whatever. And Mike's like, no. We bought this truck, took every single thing apart on it and stripped it down to bare metal and then redid all the body work on it because of the dye marks in the bed sides from stamping the bed on his race truck. Okay. By the way, big wheel standing up truck. Okay. And I'm like, of course you did. Yes, this is Mike. This is what he does. So, and he's like, and it's not the factory yellow. I mean, it looks like it, but it's just a little off. Like we did this and we did that and everything. And then you see a factory yellow one and you're like, oh yeah, okay, he's right. It's not the factory yellow one, but yeah. So that's Mike. He does these things. But the reason that we are brothers from another mother also is the fact that one year, Mike and I met at the Salt Lake City airport in order to go to Bonneville. And I am well known for tearing up rental cars, and I've been on a no rent list or two and whatever. Mike has reserved a rental car. We go to the rental car counter. We get there. The rental car lady says, oh, hi, Mr. Copeland, blah, blah, blah. We got you this, whatever. She says, do you want to add him, and points to me as a driver on the car. Mike's like, sure. And so she takes my information and she says, you have two insurance options. One of them is a $500 deductible, the other's $1,000. Which would you like? And Mike goes, give us the $1,000 one or whatever. And she goes, okay. And he says to her, as straight faced as humanly possible, can we pay that up front? And that woman looks at him like, huh? I don't get it. I am on the floor. Hey, shut up. I'm telling a story over here. And I am on the floor. I'm dying. This is the greatest thing. From the office, like there's a lady behind the counter. From the office around the corner, you just hear a giggle, right? Like the manager's back there or whatever. Mike and I go, we get the thing, we go out, we get in the car. And the first thing we do is we back out of the spot. And it is clear that we have to drive like a mile to get out of the parking garage and all that. But the street's right in front of us. Mike's like, cook over the curb on the street. Off we went. It was perfect in every way. I was like, this is why we're friends. Right here, just another example of the dumb stuff we will get into. So,
well, we spent 4 days at Bonneville, right? That
we
was
did.
when we built the carbureted, supercharged, 2-cylinder, 126 cubic inch big block.
Yes.
And set a record on an open class because a carb float bowl extension came out and went through the motor. And
Yes.
we only had 3 pistons left.
Yeah, and Freiberger and Turk were completely ready to just call it a day. And I said, well, does it have any compression in the other ones? And Mike's like, yeah. He and I were on the same page, and literally they were done. They were like, we're going to call it a day. I'm like, no way. I went and got us permission. We went out off of the back of the pits where you're not allowed to drive, and they let us push the car to see if we could get it to run because it would not start with the starter. We had to push the thing like 45 miles an hour before it would start. Oh, yeah.
It wouldn't run below 5,000 RPM because there
No.
was so much rotational friction with the other pistons and valves. I mean, I cranked all the exhaust valves open, so
Yep.
it just blew the fuel straight through the motor out into the exhaust. We hose clamped 6 spark plugs to the front roll bar tubes.
Yep.
And hooked 6 plug wires to those to ground out those plugs.
Yep.
And I set the timing and fuel based on spark plug color.
Yeah. We're not kidding. And then we set a record at like 63 miles an hour or something like that. I literally found out that what nobody ever asked at Bonneville. I went and said, okay, so how fast can we go before the one? And they went, as fast as you want. I said, are you sure? And they said, the push car can go as fast as you want to go, but it cannot go through the timers at the one. So however fast that is, you need to make the turn before the one. And Turk drove that son of a bitch all the way to the one and hung a hard left-hander to miss the thing. And we pushed it through already going 60 mile an hour or whatever it was. It was awesome. Oh, yeah.
Yeah, but you got to appreciate Bonneville, right? If you've never been there. So, we're Chad and myself and Freiberger. And anyway, we're coming up with this idea, right? We tried to buy a motor. We went all over Craigslist. We tried to buy a car to take a motor out of. I mean, we tried everything and just couldn't come up with it, right?
Right.
So Freiberger studies all of the records and he finds this open class.
Yeah.
And we realize on 2 cylinders, we could be 128 cubic inches and we're 126.
Yeah.
With a blow-through vortex supercharger and a carburetor.
Yeah. We are owning this deal.
So we're sitting around in lawn chairs and we're all talking and there's a whole group of us now, right? Because everybody knows the motor blew up and everything. So we're sitting there and I mean, like Keith Dorton's there. I mean, the best of the best in the industry, right? And we're sitting around and we're all bouncing ideas off each other and asking questions and stuff. And it's like, well, what do you think? How should we get the fuel out? Well, let's crank the exhaust valves open. What, are we going to hit the pistons? What, well, we can only open them this far. I mean, just all of these things, right? So we spend like 2 hours talking about options and what we can do and how we can do it and everything else. And finally, we all agreed that we thought we could make it work. So we did.
Yeah, we just did it. And it was a lot of work, but it was awesome. And
the best part was when we ran the first day and got a time, and then we had to go to impound, and then we go out the next day and we get ready to run, and we take off, and Keith is pushing the mile, right? And then we cut off, and we're in the Chad and myself and Tanya and Keith Turk. We're all in the F-250 Super Duty. Freiberger's driving the car. We take off. We get almost to the mile. The motor's sounding really good, and
really good.
On two.
Yeah.
It
By
sounds really
mistake, Freiberger upshifts, right?
Yeah.
And it drops below 5,000 RPM and quits. Now, Keith is already off of the groove, and he hears it quit, and he immediately cranks the wheel to the right, smashes into the back of the car.
I mean,
wham! Like, there was a 10 or 15 mile an hour difference when he hits the car.
Oh, yeah.
Bam! Foot on the floor on this diesel Super Duty. Freiberger downshifts, the thing lights, and Keith cuts off of the track again and misses this 1 mile start cone by maybe an inch.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Right? So we spin around and go back to the start line, and David's running and of course, Chad finds out we only have to run 3 mile course, but we only have to run the 1 to the 2.
Yeah.
From the end of the 1 to the 2.
That's all we
got
to do.
Cut off. So we're doing that, and the thing starts smoking, and the fire department takes off, and they're chasing the car in case it catches on fire. But when they announced that we had made it, and that we had, what speed we had ran, there was probably 50 people on the starting line.
Yeah.
Everyone was cheering and clapping and everything.
Oh, yeah.
That's what Bonneville is.
You can do it.
I went there. I was supposed to drive the car.
Right.
I mean, I was in Nebraska at Sand Hills running the closed highway race, and I was going 183 in a Corvette, and I wanted my 200 mile an hour hat, right? So we had all agreed and put the whole deal together for me to go drive the car, but I had to do my licensing runs, and when we broke the motor, you can't license at 40 miles an hour.
No.
So anyway, it's a whole story,
about that.
but there's hundreds of those stories in our live experiences.
Oh, yeah.
Chad and I have been so many places together, and so many different, do you think
Mike,
we could? I think
Mike,
we could.
Do you know who my dad is or was?
No.
Jim Crosby.
Who, yeah.
Wow.
So the goldenrod was his dad's baby,
Wow.
And Dan Parker asked what the record was. Oh, no, Doug DeLay did. I don't remember what the mile an hour was now, but the way it works at Bonneville, we set a record, which means we got a thing that said we set a record, but somebody literally the next run, like there were guys that were going after our record. They waited and ran after us because they knew, like, if we can do this, it'll be epic. And then they hit the record by another mile or 2 mile an hour. Or whatever.
Oh, no, they hit the record by like another 60 miles an hour.
Oh, that's right. The dudes that went 100 and something miles an hour. Yeah. I forgot about that. And so these dudes but they made sure we got to run it first so that we could go, hey, we got the number. You know what I mean? And it was pure entertainment. Absolutely. So,
yeah. Dan Parker asked if I ever got my hat. I never did.
Yeah, he says he knows a guy with a Corvette that would be perfect for it.
Yeah, I actually have one sitting beside my barn that's been 229 in a mile.
Oh, nice.
So, but it's something I'd like to do. Today I don't know how I'd find the time. Right. Just, at least for the next.
Busy saving the industry.
And another year or two until I retire again. So.
Yeah. Right. Yeah. I'm sorry. You now can't retire for another 5 years. I mean, hello.
It's
just too bad.
The right people could carry on what we've started. So.
Yeah. Right.
Yeah.
I love it.
So the elephant in the room, Chad, is the bus going to be called the Hindi bus lines or what?
Yeah. Right. I know. No, I have no idea what we're going to name it yet, but we'll see. Mike, he's making fun of me because I bought a school bus. Well, I haven't officially bought it yet, but I have made the deal to buy a school bus.
Tell me what you're going to do.
So I'm taking the school bus body and I'm taking it and I am shortening it. I'm taking the chunk out of the middle of it to put on my mezzanine in my shop and make it into my office, okay, upstairs. So I will have it as my office upstairs. And then, because I bought an interesting school bus, a 1955 Series 1 school bus, I am going to take the two ends and scrunch them together and make a short bus, which is super appropriate for me to own. So, you know.
Take you back to your childhood.
You are that guy that moved in the neighborhood.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, yeah. I would totally. You guys shut up. You all know that when it's going to have 4 rows of seats and a giant cooler full of beer and whatever Mike wants to drink because he doesn't drink. And so we will all go like on power tour in it and it'll be awesome.
How's the Blazer coming?
The Blazer's awesome. Blazer's great.
Hey, my liver's going to die before that bus gets done.
Maybe. The pace you're going, it might.
I'm like sitting here jealous as hell of Crosby because he's done this before and he was smart enough to have multiple bottles of beverage.
Oh, absolutely. Yes.
And I'd have to get up and go over to the refrigerator to get another one. So
yeah, see?
He's smarter than me.
Yeah.
I get exercise.
Occasionally.
Dan Parker said he's in on the bus as well. He wants to ride. All right, ladies and gentlemen, I think we need to call it a night. Mike, thank you so much for joining us. Susie, thank you so much for being a part of this. I know that McTaggart had he had a computer failure or something, and he disappeared a little while ago. But
he had to pack. He has to leave tomorrow.
Oh, that's true. Yes, yeah. That's right.
Yeah, I heard Rodney. I think he loaded the car by himself on the trailer for tomorrow. So.
Oh, that's funny.
Yeah.
But again, thank you so much. We will have you on another episode, Mike, as well, because you just need to be on the show and have fun. That's for sure. So, but thank you so much. Where can people find more information?
Susie?
Right now, our Facebook page for Arrington Performance. I hope to have the website launched next week.
Ooh, very
which
nice.
Will be Arrington-Hydrogen, Mike?
Yes.
Arrington-Hydrogen. But
Very
right
cool.
now, we have everything on our Facebook page. So
yeah, and my personal Facebook has a lot of it too. So
okay,
Google Arrington Hydrogen.
Oh, I was gonna say, tons of stuff out there on the truck.
Hopefully,
and we just ran a blog item today that is the 30,000 foot level on this on BaneShift, and obviously you can read that. There's a great video there as well from the build. Which is cool. So, and even a picture of the Rampage on there. So check it out, Dan Parker. You can see the, oh, yeah. I got one in on him. He always beats me to the punch. So I owe him a few. But we appreciated everybody that tuned in. MGB, Dan, Scott, all of you guys. Thank you so much. We do appreciate it. Thanks for all the great questions and all of the comments. Everything like that is what we need. For sure. So thank you. Keep spreading the word and we will keep doing good things. Thanks for joining us on PowerShift. We will see you in 2 weeks. Thank you, everybody. Have a good night.
Thanks, Chad.
Bye.
Bye-bye.